Tribulation of Myriad Races. Chapter 1, Father and Son. Year 350 of the Onping calendar. Nanyuan City, Great Xia Prefecture. Su family. The moment Su Yu stepped through the door into his home, he was assaulted by the aroma coming from the dishes on the dining table. Quickly tossing his school bag aside, he walked up to the dining table and picked up a piece of red braised pork before throwing it into his mouth. While chewing, he looked at the indistinct figure in the kitchen and said, "Dad, maybe prepare a soup tomorrow? It's getting tiring eating meat every day. Stop being picky. You should be happy to have something to eat." Su Long's grumbling voice came from the kitchen. "Also, you're already 18 this year. When are you going to learn to take care of yourself? I have been taking on the roles of both father and mother for you all these years. I'm finally going to get my freedom." Still busy chewing the piece of red braised pork in his mouth, Su Yu smiled and praised, "Dad, your culinary skills are good enough that you're almost a professional chef. I wish I could help in the kitchen as well, but unfortunately all the food I make is inedible." Heh, Su Long merely smirked at the reply. Su Yu was all talk and no action. After all, he had never even tried cooking. With a height of 1.9 meters and a sturdy physique, Su Long looked rather comical dressed in a tiny apron that did not fit the image his powerful body projected. That had always been a point of contention for Su Yu, and it was the same today. Shaking his head, Su Yu complained, "Dad, can't you get a bigger apron? It's not like we can't afford it." "What do you know?" Su Long couldn't even be bothered to answer the question. After placing the final dish onto the dining table, he sat down without taking off his apron. "Eat. We must save every bit of money we can. In any case, this apron is still new." "Dad, you've been saying that for the past 3 years." Su Yu rolled his eyes. Sure, it was understandable for his father to claim that the apron was new 3 years ago. But it was rather shameless of his father to still claim the same 3 years later. Su Long did not care about his son's remarks. He started gorging on the food on the table. Su Yu was already used to his father's antics. He sat down and started eating as well. While eating, he sighed and said, "Dad, is the battle picking up at the front line again? On my way back, I saw the military recruitment truck downstairs. They must be here recruiting in our neighborhood. I wonder who's going to sign up." At that, Su Long stopped eating. He placed his bowl and chopsticks down before solemnly saying, "It is everyone's duty to protect one's home and defend one's country. Just listen to yourself. Are you trying to say that it's bad to be a soldier?" "Not at all." Su Yu hurriedly explained himself. His father was a retired soldier. He definitely had to watch his mouth around this topic. After all, it wouldn't be fun to be at the receiving end of his father's palm that was the size of a bear's paw. Su Long snorted before returning to his meal. Suddenly, Su Long spoke again. His tone shifted into a gloomy one as he said, "The front line is in turmoil. The various armies have been recruiting repeatedly. New soldiers are constantly being recruited while veterans are being recalled." Su Yu was in the midst of eating when he paused and looked up at his father. His attitude changed completely as he frowned and asked, "Dad, that has nothing to do with us, right? You have been retired for 18 years and I've just reached adulthood. Also, I'm applying for the high academies. The recruiters won't come to us." "It has been 18 years, Su Long sighed. Yes, it had been 18 years. During the past 18 years, the devil-subduing army has recalled retired veterans 5 times. After reaching 50 years old, I won't be fit to be recalled any longer. During the previous 4 recalls, you were too young. I was worried about you, so I did not answer the recalls." Su Yu's expression changed rapidly as he said, "Dad, our family can be exempted from joining the army. The policy allows this." "Yes, the policy allows this." Su Long grinned. He raised his head and gazed at his son before saying, "Therefore, I've not been answering the recalls. In the past 18 years, there have been 4 recalls apart from the current recall. I've not answered any of them. But now, my son has finally reached adulthood. He is now 18. Dad." Su Yu had an ugly expression. "What are you trying to say?" "You know what I'm trying to say." Su Long gazed at his son with a gratified and satisfied expression. He smiled and said, "Your dad might be useless, but 18 years ago, he was a platoon leader in command of 30 soldiers. At the time, your mom was on the verge of giving birth, so I requested for a leave of absence and returned." Who would have guessed that your mom would leave this world just like that? You were a newborn and we didn't have anyone else in the family to take care of you. I couldn't leave, so I was forced to retire from the army. Su Long had a bitter smile on his face. When I left, not a single one of my comrades saw me off. No, it wasn't that they wanted me gone, but they were afraid that I wouldn't be able to leave after seeing them. It has been 18 years. Not one of them has tried contacting me. They're all afraid that I wouldn't be able to resist returning. Even in my dreams I can see them shouting at me to return home and take care of my baby. Of my 30 brothers, 9 were killed on the battlefield the first year after I left. Not one of the surviving members has left the army. Do you know what the remaining 21 of them are doing? They're all still on the battlefield right now. Tears started welling in Su Long's eyes. I was selfish, so I didn't dare to ask about them. I had not responded to the previous 4 recalls. But this time, if your dad has to die, he would rather die a soldier on the battlefield. Your dad does not wish to die behind the front line. Su Yu sank into silence. He was aware that his father had never forgotten the front line and the old comrades there. If his mother had not passed away during childbirth back then, his father would never have retired from the devil-subduing army. He had always thought that 18 years would be enough for his father to forget and let go of the past. Today, he learned that his father had not forgotten about the past after all. Dad, Su Yu paled as he persuaded, the front line is in turmoil. The number of casualties among our soldiers are only getting higher and higher. In the past 18 years alone, the army had recalled retired veterans 5 times. In short, a recall was made once every 3 to 4 years. You used to be a soldier. You know very well what that means. I'm still single. I still haven't entered a high academy. I still haven't gotten you a grandchild. Su Long grinned, it's fine. I'll be waiting for all that. What? You think I'm going to be throwing my life away on the battlefield? No. I'm there to win the war. Dad. Cut the crap, kid. Eat your meal. Su Long cut his son off. While eating, he mumbled, after this meal, you'll have to start preparing your own meals. If you can't cook, go eat outside. Use the money in my card. You know the password. They're still waiting for me downstairs. I need to make this quick. Remember to mail me a letter after passing your academy entrance exam. I'll be reading your letters during my free time. You'll be getting into a cultural research academy. Your old man is very proud of you, you know that? You're practically guaranteed a spot in a cultural research academy already. Your teacher told me that barring anything unexpected happening, you'll definitely be able to join one. A talent is finally going to emerge from our Su family. I do wonder sometimes. How exactly have you grown that brain of yours? You're way too smart. I used to wonder if you're actually my son. Fortunately, you greatly resemble my younger self in appearance. Su Yu had a pale complexion at the realization that his father was about to step into the battlefield. Nevertheless, he still couldn't stop himself from challenging that claim. Dad, are you sure I look like your younger self? What bullshit question is that? That's the truth. Su Long looked up, revealing his rough face and grinned, feel free to ask our neighbor if you doubt me. Su Yu was speechless. He knew that his father was trying to shift the topic, so he returned to the previous topic. Dad, must you go? It's not that I'm looking down on you, but it has been 18 years since you left the battlefield. You haven't been cultivating much either. Even now, you're still at the 9th stage great strength realm. Will you even be helpful on the battlefield? Who are you looking down on? Su Long said furiously, so what if I'm only at the 9th stage great strength realm? Strength is not the only thing that matters on the battlefield. Otherwise, wars would be pointless. Everything is possible on the battlefield. I'll have you know that I once killed an infinite strength realm expert when I was only a 7th stage great strength cultivator. Su Yu was still very distressed. He had no idea if that story was true, but his father had repeated the story for many years. It was highly probable that his father was telling the truth. However, he did not want his father to go to war. The front line was very chaotic. Every single year, a large number of soldiers would die there. The situation there was only getting more and more dangerous. His father was nearly 50 years old. Su Yu didn't even dare to imagine what it would be like for someone like that to return to the battlefield. Dad. Shut up. Su Long interrupted his son. He stood up and put the dishes away before saying with a solemn expression, "I've signed myself up. If I don't show up, I'll be considered a deserter. It's fine if I don't show up before signing up, but you know the consequences for not showing up now. A deserter will be executed." "Dad, couldn't you have waited for me to come back and talk about this before signing up?" Just thinking about it made Suyu furious. He knew that there was nothing he could do to change this. His father was right. It didn't matter before signing up. The recall order was not compulsory. All these veterans who had retired alive were people who had contributed to the army during their time on the battlefield. But upon signing up, one would be considered a soldier yet again. Not showing up after that would cause one to be labeled a deserter. "What is there to talk about?" Su Long said dismissively, "Don't worry. I won't die. Even if I do end up dying, you will be eligible for a nice compensation. Don't forget to claim it if I end up dying. That will be enough money for you to get a wife and raise a child. See, your old man has everything planned for you." Then, Su Long removed the apron from his body and picked up the backpack that he had packed earlier, behaving as casually as someone leaving for a short trip. "Do well in your exam. People like you who are supporting humanity behind the front line are just as important. Perform well in the Cultural Research Academy and bring glory to our Sioux family." Cultural Research Academy, yes, I'll need to tell everyone about that after returning to the army. I have a son that has managed to enter a Cultural Research Academy. That's far more incredible than their children. It's a pity that I won't be here to see your acceptance letter. Remember to snap a picture of the letter and mail it to me. I need proof or those fellows will think that I'm merely bragging. Dad. Suyu stood up and ran after his departing father in panic. His father was really going to leave. He had been used to living with his father for the past 18 years. He was not mentally prepared for this sudden departure. "You're all grown up now. Don't cry like a little boy." Su Long grinned. "If you're still a child, I won't leave. But now that you're an adult, I must go. When I left 18 years ago, there were several kids as old as you currently are in the platoon. Do you know? I dreamed of them. They were crying in pain in the dream, telling me to kill all those animals. I regret my decision to not send you to the military house of dependents back then. After all, there would still be someone looking after you while I'm in the army if I did." Su Long teared up. "This is the 5th recall. During the previous 4 recalls, I had my luggage packed up every single time. But every time I laid my eyes on you, I selfishly stayed behind. I couldn't bring myself to leave. This is the 5th time. Will there be a next time for me? I'll probably be over 50 by then and the devil-subduing army will no longer accept me. It is time for me to go. The all-heaven battlefield is waiting for me. Just you watch. I'll kill a few infinite strength realm experts this time and keep the evidence. You won't be able to doubt me anymore after that." Then, Su Long waved his hand and walked away. This was the very first time Suyu had seen his father this carefree and heroic in his 18 years of life. However, this wasn't something he wanted to see. "Dad. I told you to cut the crap." Standing before the door, Suyu clenched his teeth and shouted, "If you fail to return, I'll become a live-in son-in-law. I'll change my surname and sever the inheritance of your Sioux family. If you really don't care, trust that I'll really dare to do so as well." Su Long staggered and nearly turned around to unleash profanities at his son. He suddenly had the urge to stay behind and beat up his son. He knew that his son would really be capable of doing something like that. It hadn't been easy for the Su family to finally give birth to a talented individual like Suyu. He definitely wouldn't be able to accept such a talent marrying into someone else's family. Chapter 2, for Major Academy Types. Su Long had left in a carefree manner, leaving Suyu behind with an empty feeling. His father's departure had been too abrupt. He hadn't even been given any time to mentally prepare himself. He was both worried about his father's safety and his future life. He was already used to his father's care and companionship. Thus, he found it hard to get used to living alone all of a sudden. "Dad, you left before doing the dishes." Suyu grumbled, trying to find some humor in the terrible situation he was in. Eventually, he sighed. There were things that he did not want to think about as the mere thought of those things would make him anxious. The all-heaven battlefield was incomparably dangerous. He was worried that if he kept thinking about it, he wouldn't be able to resist rushing out and dragging his father back. Cultural Research Academy? Not in the mood to do the dishes, Suyu plopped himself down on the couch and blanked out. His father had been nagging about his entry to a Cultural Research Academy before leaving. Previously, Suyu had been planning to apply for the Cultural Research Academies. But now, if you hadn't left for the All-Heaven battlefield, I would definitely apply for a Cultural Research Academy. But why did you insist on going to the All-Heaven battlefield? Do you expect me to not be worried about you? You might be stuck there for years. Am I supposed to keep worrying about you behind the front line? You're not a child anymore. Shouldn't you think about all that? Suyu grumbled as he rubbed his temple. You left me with no choice. You're not home anyway. I'll just apply for a war academy instead, said Suyu as he gnashed his teeth in anger. A Cultural Research Academy was an excellent place to be. It was the place where one would study the culture of the myriad races, analyze their cultivation methods, and learn about their civilizations. Every single cultural researcher was treated like a treasure that would be allowed to stay behind instead of heading to the battlefield. On the other hand, a war academy was a place meant to serve the battlefield. Previously, he had worked hard with the goal of entering a Cultural Research Academy so that he could safely stay behind the front line and his father's side. Alas, that old man of his had ended up being the one leaving for the All-Heaven battlefield instead. If he were to enter a Cultural Research Academy, he would no longer have any opportunity to head to the front line. A war academy was different. It was rumored that their students had plenty of chances to enter the battlefield for their practical classes. War academy, strength will be required to pass the exam. It was easy for Suyu to think about it, but he still couldn't help worrying. A war academy was not a place one could enter easily. Strictly speaking, it was even harder to join than a Cultural Research Academy. At the very least, that was the case for him. A Cultural Research Academy had relatively low requirements in terms of strength. That wasn't the case for a war academy. After all, that was a place meant to supply the front line with capable warriors. Source opening, great strength, and infinite strength. Those were the early cultivation realms for the human race. Humans were born with bodies unsuitable for cultivation. Only after opening the 9 acupoints would one be able to link up the meridians in one's body with source chi and truly became a cultivator. The 9 acupoints of the source opening realm consisted of mouth, nose, eyes, ears, spirit palace, and 100 openings. The latter 2 were the acupoints located at one's head and navel. Only by opening the 9 acupoints would one be able to take in source chi, refine one's body, strengthen one's bones, and shed one's mortal body to become a powerful warrior. I've just opened the 3 acupoints of my nose and mouth. There are still no signs of my ear acupoints opening. I'm not even a 4th stage source opening cultivator yet. It won't be easy for me to join a war academy, Suyu muttered to himself. A war academy existed to nurture expert combatants. It was an expensive task and they wouldn't waste their resources on a weakling. To have a higher chance at grabbing a spot in a war academy, it would be better for Suyu to open his ear acupoints as well and reach the 5th stage source opening realm. Of course, if he could also open his eye acupoints on top of that to reach the 6th or even the 7th stage, he would be practically guaranteed a spot there. As for the genius individuals who had managed to open their spirit palace and 100 openings as well, they would have their pick at which war academy they wished to join. Those capable of opening all 9 acupoints before 20 years old could join a war academy at any time. No academy would reject such an individual. I'm still at the 3rd stage source opening realm. Suyu sighed. Sure, the 3rd stage source opening realm wasn't too bad, but it wasn't that good either. The Nanyuan Secondary School, which he was a part of, had 9 final year classes with a total of 750 students. Among the students, there were about 100 students at the 3rd stage source opening realm and about a dozen students who were at a higher stage. Based on the past acceptance rate of the various academies, less than 20 of these students would be accepted. In other words, those at the 4th stage would have a high chance of being accepted while only 1 in 100 would be accepted among those at the 3rd stage. Furthermore, not all war academies were equal. An academy that would accept 3rd stage students would probably be a rather weak academy as well. Rather than entering a war academy of that caliber, Suyu might as well enter a Cultural Research Academy. 3 more months, war academy, I'll see what I can do, said Suyu with his teeth clenched. Since his father was unreliable, he would have to be the reliable one. Just what was his father thinking when he decided to head to the All-Heaven battlefield at that age? Late at night, Suyu was once again roused from his sleep drenched in sweat. It's that damn dream again. Dad, Suyu called out by habit. In the past, his dad would quickly rush over whenever he woke up from a nightmare. But today, there was no movement outside his room after his shout. Suyu blanked out slightly before recalling that his father had left earlier that afternoon. Sigh, Suyu turned on the light and checked his communicator. It was around 3 in the morning. It would still take some time before the sun would rise. It has been more than 10 years. Nobody would be able to endure over 10 years of continuous suffering from nightmares. It was better nowadays as Suyu was already used to it. Back then, he had been so afraid that he refrained from sleeping and nearly killed himself from exhaustion. Just why is this happening? Leaning against the bedhead, Suyu wondered. In fact, he had been asking the same question for years. He had told his father about the issue, but his father was helpless. When he went to the hospital, the doctor told him that something once frightened him so much that it left a psychological trauma on him. However, Suyu couldn't remember anything like that happening before. It's the same every single time. At the end of the dream, I'll be pursued by some monsters, Suyu was vexed. He had been tortured by the same nightmare every single day. Or to be precise, he had been pursued by others in his dream every single day. However, that was where the similarities ended, as the pursuers would always be different each time. Instead of being humans, his pursuers consisted of all sorts of monsters. Their appearances were indistinct, but from their shapes, it was clear that these were all different life forms. Just what had he done to deserve such a torture? Suyu reckoned that he was probably the only person to have ever been pursued for more than 10 years in his dreams. Back then, his father had suspected that a spell of the nightmare race was the culprit. However, this was the human realm. If it was really someone from the nightmare race, that person would have been killed by human experts long ago. After all, this was an issue that had persisted for more than 10 years. If a nightmare race expert had actually gone through the trouble of sneaking into the human realm, that expert would probably be setting their sights on a human expert. Only the most idiotic person would waste so much effort over such a long period of time on an ordinary human. Is there no end to this? This is so annoying. Suyu complained. He wondered if this would ever end. It was a good thing he was already used to the nightmares. Otherwise, he wouldn't even be able to properly live his life. Dad said that by opening the 9 acupoints and entering the great strength realm, my body will be nurtured by source chi and I'll be immune to all sickness and evil spirits. I should be fine then, right? Suyu could only hope that the nightmares would stop after entering the great strength realm. With so many thoughts in his mind, time passed quickly. Before he knew it, sunlight was shining through his window, signifying the arrival of dawn. Su Long might have left, but life went on as usual for Suyu. It was not a public holiday today, so he still needed to attend school. After brushing his teeth and eating a simple breakfast, Suyu grabbed his school bag and left his house. Downstairs, a young man with a crew-cut hair was waiting. When the young man saw Suyu, he hurriedly shouted, I heard from my father that Uncle Su." Suyu answered before the youngster could finish his words. The crew-cut youth was getting anxious. What was Uncle Su thinking? He's a grown-ass man. Going to the all-heaven battlefield at his age is basically sway. The crew-cut youth suddenly stopped. He wanted to say that Su Long was on a suicide mission, but those weren't something he could say. He might believe it, but he definitely shouldn't be saying that in front of Suyu. It's his choice. I can't stop him. Suyu forced himself to smile. In any case, there are millions of soldiers at the all-heaven battlefield with numerous human experts holding the fort there. He won't die so easily. I know. But Uncle Su is only a great strength cultivator. The crew-cut youth appeared even more anxious than Suyu. Great strength cultivators might be incredible for people like us, but they are the weakest of the weak at the all-heaven battlefield. Even a fresh recruit of the myriad races at the all-heaven battlefield would already be at the great strength realm. I know. Why are you not worried at all? The crew-cut youth was panicking on behalf of Suyu. If he was placed in Suyu's shoes, he would be crying already by now. Would that help? Suyu felt helpless. There was no changing the fact that his father had left. Worrying wouldn't change anything. That was definitely not something he should be doing now. This friend of his was still as impatient as ever. Cut the crap. Let's get to school first. School? The crew-cut youth was astonished. You're still going to school? Suyu glared at the crew-cut youth silently, to the point the crew-cut youth was feeling uncomfortable. What kind of bullshit question is that? If I'm not going to school, am I supposed to stay at home and wipe my tears every single day while waiting for bad news to come from the front line? Suyu rolled his eyes. Just what was this fellow saying? Come on. Let's go to school. The school will send a list of applicants to the various academies in a few days. I'll need to sign up for that. I thought you're signed up already. Chin Hao was curious. Have you forgotten? We signed up together last week. I'm aware of that. I signed up for the Cultural Research Academies previously. This time, I'm signing up for the War Academies. Chin Hao was stunned. War Academy? You. Let's go. Suyu cut Chin Hao off before he had the chance to say more. The decision had been made yesterday. The first step was to sign up for the War Academies. As for actually passing the entrance examination, that would be an entirely different matter. Examination Registration Center, Nanyuan Secondary School. The teacher in charge of registration checked her records before asking curiously, Suyu, you're already signed up for the Cultural Research Academies, right? Having mastered the languages of 18 different races, you're one of the best students in Nanyuan. You can even get into the Great Xia Cultural Research Academy easily. Why are you signing up for the War Academies? Generally speaking, students signing up for both types of academies were those without the confidence to enter either. Thus, they were forced to diversify their options. Suyu was intelligent and hardworking. Over the past few years, he had learned the languages of 18 different races. Even the most popular Cultural Research Academy in Great Xia, the Great Xia Cultural Research Academy, would open its doors wide for someone like him. Su Long wouldn't have been so confident that he asked for his son's acceptance letter in advance otherwise. Suyu did not give much explanation for his choice. He smiled and said, Teacher, it is always a good idea to not put all my eggs in one basket. Everyone is allowed to sign up for 2 types of academies, right? It won't hurt to be safe. That's true. But that's really not needed for you. All you need to do is perform well during your exam, said the teacher with a wide smile. The school had long submitted the names of top students like you. You will still need to take the entrance exam, but in truth, people like you already have your names recorded in the various high academies of Great Xia. Even if you somehow failed your first exam, they will still give you a second chance. Besides Suyu, Chen Hao couldn't help but to enviously ask, Teacher, am I included in that name list as well? The teacher glanced at him and smiled, Yes. Your name has been recorded by the Internal Affairs Academies. Chen Hao's face fell. Internal Affairs Academy. The 4 major types of academies were War, Cultural Research, Scientific Research, and Internal Affairs. The Internal Affairs Academies focused on various life skills such as automobile repair, cooking, driving, administration, entertainment, and so on. Meanwhile, the War Academies focused on training warriors, the Cultural Research Academies focused on studying the myriad races, and the Scientific Research Academies focused on the research of weapons, pills, and so on. These 3 were decent types of academies to enroll in. The Internal Affairs Academies were the exception among the 4. For youngsters like them, that was the type of academy that they would only enter as a last resort. The teacher ignored Chen Hao. After helping Suyu with the registration, she smiled and said, Remember to focus on cultural research. Maybe try to learn a language or 2 in addition to what you already know before the entrance exam. That will be helpful for you in the future. As for cultivation, there is no rush. For cultural research academies, you're only required to reach the great strength realm. At that point, you'll be strong enough to be impervious to all illness. Strength was not the priority of cultural research academies. The teacher was worried that Suyu would misplace his focus, hence her advice. Suyu nodded with a smile. After all, the teacher meant well. Nevertheless, he would be placing more effort on cultivation before the entrance examination. Chapter 3, Myriad Race Compendium. Outside the registration center. After taking several steps forward, Suyu suddenly turned around and asked in astonishment, Why are you still following me? Chen Hao was confused. Aren't we going to class? No. No? Where are you going then? Chen Hao felt wronged. Suyu was the one who had said that he wanted to go to school earlier. Why was he changing his mind now? Library. Suyu said indifferently, I don't have to attend any of the classes here anymore. The instructor gave me permission to skip my classes. As for you, are you intending to get your parents invited to the school by skipping classes? Chin Hao felt terrible hearing that. He ran away while covering his face. Yes, Suyu no longer needed to attend any of the classes. The instructor had personally given him the permission for that. But that wasn't the case for Chen Hao. Suyu was exempted even from the cultivation class. He was already a third-stage source opening cultivator. As far as the teachers were concerned, that was enough for him. None of them saw him joining a war academy, so nobody would push him to cultivate more. Looking at the departing Chen Hao, Suyu shook his head and laughed. Chen Hao's father was old friends with his father. Meanwhile, Chen Hao and him were classmates close enough to be considered best friends. However, Chen Hao was a raucous person, so it could be rather tiring to hang around that fellow at times. Library. As Suyu was a frequent visitor here, he was quite close with the librarian. He would frequently spend an entire day in the library. After several years of doing so, it was only understandable that the two of them were able to cultivate a close relationship. Suyu, you've already mastered over 10 different languages. You should be taking this time to relax a bit. Why are you still studying so hard? Teased the librarian. In Nanyuan Secondary School, Suyu could be considered a small celebrity. For the majority of the students, they only needed to master the divine and devil language, the demon language, and the common language. Those languages alone were taxing enough to learn that they wouldn't be able to learn more languages. Suyu, on the other hand, had been learning even the lesser-known languages. Suyu merely smiled, not saying anything. He went straight to the third floor. As the classes were still ongoing, the library was devoid of people. A few teachers were there for research, but barely any students could be found in the library. In any case, most students would rather bitterly cultivate than spend their time studying those indecipherable handwriting. For these youngsters, there was no point using their brain for issues that could be solved with force. The teachers noticed Suyu, but none bothered him. Everyone was silently immersed in their readings. Suyu did not bother anyone in the library either. Walking a familiar path, he headed toward the bookshelf that he had frequented most. After looking over the shelf, he pulled out a massive book. Ox-faced fish. That was a myriad race compendium. Over the years, humanity had made a compilation of the races they knew into books that served to educate the human race about the myriad races. Suyu was holding one such book in hand. The so-called myriad race compendium referred to a series of books instead of a single book. Suyu had no idea how many books there were in the series. After all, access to some of the books were restricted to only a select group of people. There were 39 of these books in Nanyuan Secondary School, detailing 39 different races. The contents of these books included the appearance of these races, their habits, customs, languages, unique cultivation methods, combat preferences, hunting guide, and so on. None of these were what Suyu wanted to learn at the moment. He was looking at the title page, the page where the illustration of the race in question could be found. Ox-faced fish sounded like some sort of fish, but that wasn't the case. Looking at the illustration, Suyu noted that this was a race similar to an ox with the tail of a snake and a pair of wings on its back. As for the reason for this race to be known as the ox-faced fish, it was because this was an amphibious race capable of living both on land and underwater. In terms of combat strength, this race was stronger underwater than when on land. Despite having a pair of wings, this race was incapable of flight. The pair of wings functioned similarly to chicken wings that would allow them to jump higher instead of actually soaring into the sky. Flesh of ox-faced fish, capable of expelling poison, an excellent antidote. Living in the Mount Root realm, a realm filled with mountains and bodies of water. The ox-faced fish hibernate during winter before waking up in summer. Be very cautious entering the Mount Root realm during summer as the danger rating would increase exponentially during that time. A neutral force at the All-Heaven battlefield. Do not kill without reason or explicit permission. Suyu skimmed through the contents of the book. He had read all these before, but he had not learned the ox-faced fish language. That was an extremely difficult language to learn, especially since it was such an obscure language. There was also the fact that the ox-faced fish wasn't even the dominant race of the Mount Root realm. Suyu wasn't here to see all that. He was mainly here for the illustration of the ox-faced fish. Ox-faced fish. Suyu muttered as he recalled his nightmare the night before. Was that the monster chasing him in his dream last night? When he was younger, he wouldn't read too much into these nightmares. But as years went by and he grew older, he started analyzing the nightmares, trying to learn more about them. What manner of beings were these monsters that had been chasing after him in his nightmares? Did these monsters exist in real life? Over the years, people had come to view him as a genius that was willing to put in the hard work to learn the languages of the myriad races, reaching the point of mastering 18 languages and putting others to shame with his hard work. In truth, he had only been working so hard to learn about the myriad races due to his nightmares. As he spent more and more of his time researching the myriad races, he eventually started learning more languages to understand the myriad races better. The dream world is too blurry. I can't be sure if it was an ox-faced fish. But the monster in the dream last night did have a pair of wings. I think it even mooed like an ox. Suyu wondered to himself. As things were very blurry in the dream, he wasn't sure if the monster last night was really an ox-faced fish. However, he had managed to pinpoint several races that matched some of the monsters that had appeared in his dreams in the past. Thus, Suyu felt that he was on the right track. The monsters in his dreams were the myriad races that existed in reality. It had been over 10 years, over 4,000 nights. He had encountered thousands of different monsters in his dreams. From the sheer variety of the monsters that had appeared in his dreams, he couldn't imagine them existing if they weren't actually the myriad races that existed in reality. Myriad races, you guys sure look very highly upon me to come after me in my dreams. Suyu smiled bitterly. He was just a normal human being. Was there a point for the myriad races to invade his dreams? At that thought, Suyu gnashed his teeth in fury. He didn't even know them. He had never even met any of them. Why would they haunt him so? Was it fun to torture an ordinary person like him? But why exactly are these dreams happening? Suyu couldn't understand. He could accept being tortured by these monsters in his dreams if he had actually met them. But he had never even left Nanyuan City his entire life. The only connection he had to these monsters was the fact that he had read about them in books. How would that establish a connection with these monsters? After identifying the monster that he had seen in his dream last night, Suyu placed the book back on the shelf. There were some things that he still couldn't investigate too deeply into for now. Shortly after, Suyu walked away from the bookshelf. Apart from identifying the ox-faced fish, Suyu still had some other business at the library today. A short while later, he reached a different section of the library, source opening section. This was the section housing the reading materials regarding the source opening realm. For the human race, their initial cultivation method was the source opening codex. Someone who had yet to open their 9 acupoints and were incapable of sensing source chi. However, source chi was present everywhere. Anyone could take in the ambient source chi in the air and gradually open their 9 acupoints before stepping into the great strength realm to start their physical cultivation. Opening the 9 acupoints was a lengthy process. A human cultivator would start cultivating the source opening codex at a young age. Progress could only be made one step at a time. The world of cultivation followed the law of the jungle. Geniuses would be able to rise abruptly upon starting cultivation. With a better talent in cultivation, one would naturally be able to cultivate faster. Suyu was not completely clueless about cultivation. He was aware of all that. He knew that the source opening realm wasn't a realm that could be rushed through. Progress would only happen passively. Not even hard work could accelerate the process. Even knowing all that, he still wanted to look around and see if he could find a way to accelerate his cultivation. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to find anything even after spending some time in the section. He frowned. Was that information not available here? If that was the case, he probably wouldn't be able to reach the 4th stage before the entrance examination. Suyu, what are you looking for? A short-haired girl who was reading nearby couldn't hold her curiosity and asked. She had been reading in the same section for quite a while. Although the two weren't classmates, they were both frequent visitors of the library. As time went by, they naturally came to know each other. Suyu had an apologetic look. He seemed to have disturbed her peace in the library. I'm trying to look for something related to increasing the speed of source opening cultivation, but I can't find anything. Increasing the speed of source opening cultivation? The short-haired girl muttered to herself before saying, there are several methods to accelerate the speed of source opening cultivation, but that is not recommended for humans. The source opening realm is the foundation of cultivation. The opening of 9 acupoints is a process where your foundations are built. This is a realm where stability is the priority. There is a reason the first realm was named the Source Opening Realm. It is the realm where you open the source of cultivation. Suyu, I thought you're applying for the Cultural Research Academies? This is not something they would test you on. Don't tell me you're actually trying to accelerate your cultivation. The girl was getting worried. You can't mess up your foundations. It is very dangerous. Even if you really managed to safely accelerate your cultivation, it will still negatively affect your future cultivation. Suyu smiled, I know. Don't worry, I'm not stupid. I only wanted to check if there is a safe method. If I can't find any, so be it. Is that so? The girl gave it some thought before pointing at a bookshelf at the corner. There are a few books about cultivation acceleration there. However, some of the recorded methods are too extreme. Suyu, you better don't attempt any of those. Otherwise, it will be very troublesome. You might even die from it. During the early years of the Onping calendar, some humans did attempt these methods. At that time, they were left with no choice. The world was a much dangerous place back then. However, none of those seniors had managed to reach the apex of cultivation. In fact, most of them had perished at a young age due to their unstable foundations during the Source Opening Realm. Thank you. I know. Suyu smiled and nodded. The girl was Luyu, a final year first-class student. Suyu did not know much about her, but she was a frequent visitor of the library like him. He had heard that she had also mastered a large number of languages. However, he was unclear as to how many languages she had actually mastered. He wasn't a busybody that would go around asking about that. She would probably be applying for the Cultural Research Academies. That was why she did not seem to care about her cultivation level. Suyu did not say more to Luyu. He went to the corner and started looking for the books Luyu mentioned. Source Opening Acceleration Method, My Opinions on Source Opening, Importance of Foundations. Chapter 4, Source Opening Acceleration. Suyu quickly opened the book titled Source Opening Acceleration Method. The very first page he saw rendered him speechless. This acceleration method is one that will not take survival into consideration. Take note that a majority of the people who had attempted this method had died. Suyu smiled helplessly. That preface made it clear that this would be an unreliable method. No wonder all his teachers had exhorted him to take it slow during the Source Opening Realm. They were all trying to make sure he did not step onto a wrong path. First method, bath in the blood of formidable divine and devil beings. These beings have their 9 acupoints opened at birth. They have abundant source chi in their bodies and their blood is rich in source chi. Result, body explosion. Past case, year 9 of the Onping calendar. The son of Great Ming's prefect had bathed in the blood of divine and devil beings to quickly open his 9 acupoints, bringing him into the great strength realm. He was able to open all 9 acupoints within one day, but his body also exploded on the same day. He was still 9 when he perished. Suyu grimaced. Since a real case was given, this book was most likely not lying. Son of a prefect, year 9 of the Onping calendar. That was probably the first son of the Great Ming King. Even someone like that had perished in the attempt. This was too dangerous. There was also the fact that the blood of divines and devils were not something easy to obtain. The divines and devils were among the strongest races that could be found on the 11 battlefield. It was said that even the weakest combatant of these two races on the all-heaven battlefield would be at the infinite strength realm. The son of the Great Ming King must have obtained the leftover blood from the divines and devils the Great Ming King had killed himself. With the rarity of the blood required, this method wouldn't be feasible for Suyu even if it worked. My dad isn't the Great Ming King. Suyu muttered to himself. If his dad was the Great Ming King, he wouldn't have bothered cultivating. Who was the Great Ming King? He was the supreme expert who had founded the Great Ming Prefecture, a pillar of humanity. His strength was at a level Suyu couldn't find the words to describe. In short, he was so strong that this method wasn't something Suyu should even bother entertaining. Abandoning the first method, Suyu continued reading. The more he read, the deeper his frown became. Second method, consuming the flesh of the demons. The flesh of some demonic races are capable of opening one's acupoints once consumed. Result, body explosion. Past case, early in the Onping calendar, the human race was in decline. Human experts slaughtered some demons and returned with their corpses. a large number of humans feasted on these flesh. A majority of them died from the explosion of their bodies. A minority of them were able to quickly open all 9 acupoints. Note, only a very small number of people had successfully opened their acupoints with this method. According to the records, the flesh of the following races would be helpful for acupoint opening: Golden Peng race, Barbaric Bull race, Sky Tiger race. Su Yu immediately rejected this method. What kind of a joke was this? The listed races were incredibly powerful races. They might not be as powerful as the divines and the devils, but they were still far beyond Su Yu's reach. Third method, Heavenly Source Fruit, a natural treasure. The Heavenly Source Fruit gathers the Heavenly Source Qi, the original Qi of the myriad realms. This fruit is extremely helpful for opening the 9 acupoints. Locations can be found in the Divine Realm, Devil Realm, and Demon Realm in limited numbers. Past case, year 25 of the Onping calendar. The son of Great Zhou King consumed a heavenly source fruit and opened 9 acupoints in the span of 3 days and suffered no aftereffects. Su Yu grimaced yet again. Son of Great Zhou King, that Great Zhou King only has one son, right? Isn't that the current prefect of Great Zhou, Zhou Padian? This was yet another method Su Yu had to give up on. He had never heard of this fruit before. It was definitely an incredible natural treasure. After all, Zhou Padian was still alive even now. He was also the current prefect of Great Zhou. It was clear he was incredibly powerful. But even if humanity was in possession of these heavenly source fruits, it would have nothing to do with Su Yu. Something like that was basically a high-level strategic resource. Fourth method. Su Yu continued reading, but the more he read, the more hopeless he felt. Sure enough, there were no shortcuts in source opening cultivation. It was no wonder that his teachers had never mentioned these shortcuts before. The available shortcuts would require either the blood of powerful divines and devils or some high-tier treasures. Most of these methods came with serious side effects as well. Ninth method, look for a location rich in source qi. The source qi is distributed unevenly among the various realms. Some places are barren and some places are abundant. As one could only passively train one's acupoints during the source opening realm, the speed of one's cultivation would rely on the ambient source qi of one's surroundings. Holy lands of cultivation, all heaven battlefield, secret grottos of the various academies, sacred land of the human realm. Su Yu blanked out. Locations rich in source qi. In truth, those in the source opening realm were incapable of sensing source qi. Despite that, he knew that Nanyuan City wasn't a place rich with source qi. I'm aware of this. The bigger a city is, the better the location is, and the faster one could cultivate. That is probably related to the amount of source qi in these cities. The teachers at Nanyuan had not mentioned that to their students because it was pointless. This was not an era where one could easily relocate to a different city. In other words, if I can get to a bigger city or a secret grotto, I'll be able to safely speed up my cultivation. But this method will still be slower compared to the other methods. Abundant source qi can only slightly increase one's cultivation speed instead of pushing one through the entire realm in one go like the other listed methods. Even so, this was still a method Su Yu hoped to utilize. Unfortunately, not a single one of the listed locations was a place he could reach. He could forget about the all-heaven battlefield. As for the secret grottos, it was said that the high academies would have access to those, but he knew too little about them. There wasn't even a need to consider something like the sacred land of the human realm. 10th method, source qi liquid. There are 2 types of source qi liquid, natural or synthetic. Places rich in source qi are capable of producing natural source qi liquid. However, natural source qi liquid is extremely rare. As for synthetic source qi liquid, it is something produced by Skysor realm experts. The source qi liquid has the same level of efficacy as a location with abundant source qi. There was no way Su Yu would be able to get any natural source qi liquid. As for synthetic source qi, a Skysor realm expert was required. Su Yu smiled helplessly. Skysor realm? One would still be cultivating one's physical body at the great strength and infinite strength realms. But beyond that, a human cultivator would be able to take to the skies. The Skysor realm was a stage where human cultivators would go through a qualitative transformation. Was there even a single Skysor realm cultivator in the entirety of Nanyuan City? Perhaps. Maybe the mayor was one such expert. But could Su Yu realistically get in contact with an individual of this level? As for the Nanyuan Secondary School, the strongest individual was the principal. But even the principal was only at the infinite strength realm. If an infinite strength cultivator could actually produce source chi liquid, the principal was probably nice enough that Suyu could get a few drops off him. Unfortunately, that wasn't possible. I can't rely on anyone, Suyu complained. No wonder these books were left collecting dust at the corner of the library. For people like Suyu, none of the listed methods were usable. The easiest method would either be finding a location with rich source chi or getting some source chi liquid. However, source chi liquid would require a Skysoar realm expert at the very least. That was out of Suyu's reach. His father was a 7th stage great strength cultivator 18 years ago. Due to the lack of ambient source chi in Nanyuan City and the lack of support after leaving the army, his father had only managed to reach the 9th stage after all these years. Even at such a low cultivation level, he was still regarded as an important individual in Nanyuan City. Of course, his father did not think that he was anyone special. After his retirement from the army, he had worked as the city's traffic controller and lived a relatively leisurely life. If he hadn't sacrificed his career prospects to raise Suyu, his cultivation of 9th stage great strength realm would be enough to get him a rather respectable position in Nanyuan City. None of these methods works. Finally, Suyu gave up and returned the books to the shelf. After giving it some thought, he approached Lu Yu apologetically and said, "Lu Yu, can I get a minute of your time?" Lu Yu placed down the book she was reading and smiled, "Of course. I haven't been paying much attention to cultivation all these years. Do you know about source chi liquid? You want to buy some source chi liquid?" Lu Yu immediately understood what Suyu wanted. After all, as the one who had referred those books to Suyu, she had naturally read them as well. Source chi liquid, that is a strategic resource. It is not available for purchase in Nanyuan City. However, you can find it at the capital. You need to register your real name before making the purchase. There are many types of source chi liquid. The liquid formed by experts of different cultivation levels would be different as well. Naturally, for source opening cultivators, the liquid formed by Skysoar cultivators would be the best. That would be the cheapest tier of liquid you can get. With the relatively lower density of chi in the liquid, it is much easier for source opening cultivators to digest. If the density is too high, source opening cultivators can easily harm themselves. However, it definitely wouldn't be cheap to purchase. After all, even a Skysoar cultivator would require 3 days to form a drop. However, Skysoar cultivators need their source chi for their own cultivation as well. Unless they are broke, no Skysoar realm expert would be willing to form any source chi liquid. Lu Yu gazed at Suyu and said, "Suyu, it really isn't worth it. Source chi liquid can only increase your source chi density. It won't guarantee an opening of your acupoints." "I know. Thank you. So how much for a drop of source chi liquid formed by a Skysoar expert?" Suyu naturally knew that it wouldn't be cheap. But he still wanted to learn more. After all, his father had left a decent amount of money behind before leaving. Or to be precise, Su Long had left all his money behind. After all, the All-Heaven battlefield was a dangerous place. There was no guarantee that he would be able to return with his life. 100,000 on UN dollars. Suyu grimaced. 100,000 per drop? His father was a 9th stage great strength cultivator. Working as the city's traffic controller, he had a monthly salary of 5,000 on UN dollars. That was by no means a low salary. After deducting the money used for their family's daily expenses and some cultivation resources, they could save about 20,000 or 30,000 on UN dollars per year. Through years of saving, Su Long had saved about 300,000 on UN dollars, enough for his son to start a family. But now, it turned out that all their family savings only amounted to 3 drops of source chi liquid. No wonder Lu Yu said that it wasn't worth it. Using source chi liquid to cultivate was basically the same as burning his money away. Seeing Suyu's expression, Lu Yu couldn't help but laugh. "I told you. It's expensive and totally not worth it. In truth, I had used a drop before. It only increased my source chi density for about 3 days. It's really not that good. I only used it that one time. It's too expensive. If it's really that good, the school would have long encouraged us to use it. After all, the school could still afford that much money for something actually useful. Just look around you. How many people do you know that have actually used this method? If you couldn't open your acupoints within 3 days, you will then have to buy more. In 6 days, $200,000 would be used. In 9 days, $300,000 would be wasted. Nobody can sustain that. Suyu smiled helplessly. I understand. It's really too expensive. If it guarantees the opening of my acupoints, it might still be worth a try. But if I fail to open any acupoints, I would have wasted my money for nothing. No wonder all the teachers claimed that there are no shortcuts in source opening cultivation. That's the truth, Luyu smiled. You're not going to be taking any tests related to your cultivation anyway. Why are you suddenly thinking about buying source chi liquid? I signed up for the war academies. Not putting all eggs in one basket and all that, you know? Suyu gave a short explanation before taking his leave with a smile on his face. This was the library, not a place for them to chat away. Looking at the departing Suyu, Luyu raised her brow curiously. Signed up for the war academies? Why would he sign up for the war academies for no reason? She shook her head and stopped thinking about it. Nothing would change even if this fellow had signed up for the war academies. They would most likely still end up schoolmates in the same cultural research academy. She could only hope that this fellow wouldn't do anything stupid. Chapter 5, Dreamland. Although Suyu had not managed to find a suitable cultivation acceleration method in the library, he wasn't too disappointed. If such methods could really be found so easily, the school wouldn't have kept it out of the curriculum. He was merely trying his luck. Since he couldn't find anything, he could only continue bitterly cultivating the source opening codex. Suyu grabbed his lunch at school and returned home late in the afternoon. Looking at his empty house, he sank into silence. The house felt so lonely without his father around. In the past, his father would have dinner ready for him by the time he was back from school. He wasn't used to returning to an empty and silent home. Not in the mood to make dinner, Suyu sat down on the couch and turned on the television. With the television providing the background noise, he started blanking out. This was an era where there were not many television channels in existence. In Great Xia, only the Great Xia TV station and several local stations were available. Due to the effect of the all-heaven battlefield, the television signals in the human realm were limited in coverage. Thus, the people of the different prefectures would generally only be able to gain access to their local stations. Recently, traces of the Myriad race cult have been discovered in Great Xia. All citizens of Great Xia, please remember to notify your local windcatcher department if you encounter any suspicious individuals. Those bastards. Suyu couldn't help but to curse upon hearing the news from the television. Those people were a bunch of bastards. A war was raging between the myriad races. Although the human race was able to resist the other races, humanity was not considered a powerful race among all the races in existence. As a result, some humans had decided to offer their allegiances to the other races instead. The myriad race cult was not a single cult. Rather, it was a general term used to label the various organizations of humans who had betrayed humanity. Together, these traitors sowed chaos in the human realm. Influenced by his father since he was young, Suyu loathed these traitors of humanity. Looking up at the television, he saw that a square face had appeared on the screen. The face belonged to a middle-aged man clad in red with a heroic appearance. With a cold expression, the middle-aged man commanded, "Kill." Plop. All members of the myriad race cult will be killed without mercy, declared the middle-aged man coldly. He looked straight ahead, as though his gaze could penetrate the television screen itself. Only death awaits you who have decided to enter my Great Xia. From today onwards, the martial dragon guards will start patrolling the Great Xia. Bastards of myriad race cult, feel free to stay if you're not afraid of death. Let's see how many heads you have to offer us. Sitting on the couch, Suyu grew excited. Xia Longgu, the prefect of Great Xia. As for the public execution, he did not mind it. Everyone was already used to such sights. In fact, this was not the first time something like this was shown on the television. The human race would treat all captured myriad race cult members the same, execution upon capture. This was an iron-blooded policy aimed at discouraging traitors from appearing through fear. These public executions were meant to serve as a tool to warn everyone to not even think of betraying humanity. Suyu did not care about the executions. Instead, most of his attention was on Xia Longgu. This prefect of Great Xia had a forceful personality and a formidable strength. 20 years ago, he was the commander in charge of the devil-subduing army on the All-Heaven battlefield. That was the same army Su Yu's father had served in. Thus, Xiao Longwu could be considered as his father's ex-superior. Over the years, Su Long would become incomparably excited every time he saw Xiao Longwu on the television. He would excitedly drag Su Yu over and pointed at the television while saying, "That's your old man's ex-superior." Back then, he dominated the All-Heaven battlefield and looked at all our enemies with disdain. He slaughtered so many enemies that the opposing armies would frantically flee while tossing their armors and helmets away whenever they encountered us. As time went by, even Su Yu developed a sense of worship toward this super expert who had dominated the All-Heaven battlefield. "It would be great if I can be as strong as the prefect," muttered Su Yu longingly. This was a true expert. In fact, no reigning prefect was a weakling. However, it was worth noting that even among all the prefects, Xiao Longwu was still one of the stronger ones. Even more impressive was the fact that Xiao Longwu was only about 60 years old and could be considered young for top cultivators. The other prefects were much older. For example, Zhou Padian of Great Zhou was someone who had lived since the early years of the Onping calendar. He was over 300 years old today. 20 years ago, Xiao Longwu was only over 40 years old. At such a young age, he had gained enough strength to lead the devil-subduing army. That was what Su Yu was envious of. That was too strong. In this era, 40 years old was an extremely young age. What manner of strength would one need to become the leader of the devil-subduing army? Su Yu had no idea. He only knew that one needed to be extremely powerful to do so. That wasn't a feat Xiao Longwu had accomplished simply because his grandfather was the legendary Great Xia King who had founded the Great Xia. After all, there were still other living children of prefecture founders around, but none had reached the same height. Xiao Longwu. Martial Dragon War Academy. Martial Dragon Guards. Su Yu licked his lips in excitement. He was, after all, still a youngster. Someone like him would naturally be hot-blooded. Had he ever considered joining a war academy in the past? Of course he had. There were many war academies in Great Xia. Among them, the Great Xia War Academy was one that had existed for over 300 years. It was the oldest and the most prestigious war academy in Great Xia. However, there was another top-tier war academy in Great Xia. It was the Martial Dragon War Academy. That was an academy named after Xiao Longwu himself, as the Longwu in his name meant martial dragon. It had only been established for 15 years. In such a short period of time, it had managed to establish itself as one of the best war academies in Great Xia. A majority of their graduates would end up joining the strongest army in Great Xia, the Martial Dragon Guards. It was said that even Nanyuan City's mayor had come from the Martial Dragon Guards. From that, one could see just how impressive that army was. Su Yu's father was a soldier from the devil-subduing army. Back then when he first retired, he had tried joining the Martial Dragon Guards to continue serving under his ex-superior. Unfortunately, he was rejected by Martial Dragon Guards. He was too old and too weak for such an elite army. Naturally, Su Long was extremely furious to be rejected, to the point he unleashed a string of profanities at the point of rejection. Naturally, the target of his profanities was not Xiao Longwu. Rather, it was the recruiter. Why would they reject him? It was rumored that a team of Martial Dragon Guards was stationed at Nanyuan City, but Su Yu had no idea if that was true. He had never seen those guys in the city before. Great Xia War Academy, Martial Dragon War Academy. The Great Xia War Academy mainly focused on producing soldiers to serve the front line. Their graduates will not have much chance to return home after graduation. As for the Martial Dragon War Academy, Su Yu's eyes lit up. The Martial Dragon War Academy was different. That was because their students were considered the reserve force of the Martial Dragon Guards. Of course, the students of Martial Dragon War Academy would also be sent to the front line like those from the other war academies. However, the Martial Dragon Guard's main task was to protect their homeland. In other words, they could remain in Great Xia most of the time. Of course, the moment a major conflict broke out, the elite Martial Dragon Guards would also be the first to be deployed to the All-Heaven battlefield. If the devil-subduing army was considered a standing army, the Martial Dragon Guards could be considered a field army. They have fewer limitations and more freedom. In exchange, they will be conducting the most dangerous missions in battles. If I wish to enter a war academy, the Martial Dragon War Academy would be a good choice. Unfortunately, the Martial Dragon War Academy was much harder to join than the other war academies. Due to its nature as the reserve force for the Martial Dragon Guards, they were far stricter in recruitment. Rubbing his face, Suyu smiled helplessly. Joining the Martial Dragon Guards would only be a dream for him. It would be difficult for him to join even a regular war academy, much less the Martial Dragon War Academy. What was the point of thinking all that? Is the Myriad race cult courting death? Why would they enter Great Saw? Even the Martial Dragon Guards have been deployed. I wonder if I can see them here at Nanyuan. Suyu wasn't too worried about the Myriad race cult. Those people were all akin to rats that could only scurry about in the dark. They would only dare to scheme about while in hiding. With the Martial Dragon Guards deployed, these people would probably go even deeper into hiding. How would they still dare to show themselves? Even if they did show up, Suyu had nothing to fear. This was an era where almost the entirety of the human realm had been militarized. There might not be any infinite strength realm experts in the neighborhood, but they still have some great strength realm experts around. His father was a veteran that had rejoined the army, but there were still several veterans in the neighborhood that had not returned to the army. If the Myriad race cult really decided to send several great strength cultivators over, it would be no different than suicide. Those old veterans were all retired from the battlefield. Each and every one of them was someone whose hands were drenched in blood. They wouldn't hesitate to kill. A single shout in the neighborhood would be enough to instantly summon about 7 or 8 of them. Done with watching the television, Suyu had a simple meal of instant noodles before washing up and practicing the source opening codex. That night, he went to bed early. After all, his sleep would be disturbed by nightmares. The only way for him to get enough rest was to actually get more rest. Suyu had determined that his nightmares would generally start around midnight. Prior to that, his sleep would be relatively peaceful. Night. Darkness. Dreamland. A scene that had repeated itself countless times was once again reappearing. A massive flying monster was chasing after Suyu. Fuck. There was nothing Suyu hated more than the flying monsters. They were too fast for him to escape from. He had encountered land-based monsters before, and things were definitely better during those encounters. After all, he would be able to escape the fate of being caught and eaten every now and then when facing those monsters. Meanwhile, he had never escaped from the flying monsters once. Every single time, he would be caught and eaten before waking up from the torturous nightmare. He hated these flying bastards. This nightmare was no exception to the norm. The massive flying monster was very fast. The complicated terrain of the dreamland posed no challenge for the monster. Slowly, it got closer and closer to Suyu. While running, he did not forget to look back at the monster. He wanted to see if it was one he recognized. Huh? There were a lot of different flying races in existence and Suyu only knew about a dozen of them. This time, the monster chasing after him actually looked familiar. The monster's appearance was blurry, but he could vaguely see a wart on the monster's massive head. This is an iron-winged bird. Holy shit. After so many years, I finally met a monster I know. Suyu grew excited. He knew 18 different languages, but that did not mean that he had actually met the races whose languages he had learned even after including all the monsters he had encountered in his dreams. He only had a vague idea of what these races looked like and had only learned their languages because there were some other people in Nanyuan Secondary School who knew these languages as well. He had never encountered an iron-winged bird before, but he knew its language. This was one of the 18 languages he had mastered, and he was not the only person in his school that knew the language. After all, the iron-winged bird race was commonly utilized by the various powerful races on the All-Heaven battlefield as the Air Force. Suyu hurriedly looked back and shouted, "Wei Shizhou Yun, why are you chasing me?" The gigantic bird did not reply and continued chasing him like it hadn't heard anything. "Luigio, we're friends." Still no response. Suyu cursed inwardly. Looking at the descending claws of the monster, he knew that he was going to die yet again. It was very likely that this was an iron-winged bird. However, it did not seem to be sentient. After all, this was only something conjured in his dream. Crack. Unsurprisingly, intense pain erupted on Suyu's head as it was crushed by the bird. Slowly, the dreamland dissipated around him. He knew that he was on the verge of waking up due to the pain he was feeling. Right that moment, the massive bird suddenly shouted with a shrill voice. "Moonlight!" Suyu was stunned. Next, he woke up drenched in sweat. Moonlight, no, in its tongue, it means blood. Su Yu's eyes widened. He heard what the bird said. Although the iron-winged bird had managed to kill him, it seemed furious, as though it had failed to obtain what it wanted. Blood. It was chasing after me for my blood. The bird had spoken using the iron-winged bird language, so Su Yu was able to understand it. In the past, the monsters had spoken to him as well, but he couldn't understand any of the words spoken to him since those weren't the languages he had learned. That wasn't the case this time. Blood. Blood is their goal? What does that mean? Do they want my blood? But I would bleed in the dream whenever I was injured. That had never changed anything. What is the meaning of that exactly? Su Yu was still in discomfort from his recent nightmare, but he ignored it and sank into deep thought. It wanted blood, but it couldn't get my blood from my dreams. Or maybe my blood isn't the point here? Perhaps I need the blood of its race? The blood of an iron-winged bird? What will happen if I can get some? A dream is a dream. Even if I can get my hands on some, can I even bring it into the dream? Su Yu rubbed his temple with his sweaty hand. Now wasn't the time to be bothered about his sweat. Something seemed to be clearing up about his dreams. This was the very first time in so many years that he had come so close to learning something new about his dreams. His efforts in learning the many different languages had finally paid off. Even if he had only gotten a single word from his dream, it was still worth it. I can't stop here. I need to try something. What will happen if I can get some iron-winged bird blood? But I'll encounter a different monster tomorrow. Will the iron-winged bird blood still work tomorrow? Screw it. Su Yu sat up on the bed as he reached a decision to do something about what he had learned. He was sick of being killed repeatedly in his dreams. He needed to solve this issue as soon as possible. It felt really terrible being killed in his dreams every single day. I'll go to the Xia Trade Company when the sun rises. They have all sorts of things for sale there. They might even have some iron-winged bird blood in stock. After all, the iron-winged bird is rather common on the all-heaven battlefield. I might be able to buy some there. Having made his choice, Su Yu was no longer in the mood to continue sleeping. He waited in excitement for the sun to rise. Even if this clue only had a tiny chance of deciphering his dreams, he would still be willing to try it. He was sick of being tortured every time he went to bed. Chapter 6: Iron-Winged Bird's Reappearance. Xia Trade Company. A trade company founded by the ruling family of Great Xia, the Xia Trade Company was the largest trade company in the prefecture. A 5-story building at Nanyuan's commercial district housed the Nanyuan branch of Xia Trade Company. The first floor engaged in the sale of pills, the second floor engaged in the sale of weapons, the third floor engaged in the sale of cultivation methods, the fourth floor engaged in the sale of the various products related to the myriad races, and the fifth floor engaged in high-value transactions. Su Yu went straight to the Xia Trade Company after leaving his home. He had visited the place with his father before. After all, Su Long was a great strength cultivator. Due to the low density of ambient source qi in Nanyuan City, he needed the assistance of external cultivation resources to continue cultivating. The fourth floor was further divided into several sections such as the unknown cultivation method section, demon flesh section, broken tool section, natural treasure section, and so on. Of course, since this was only a branch of a small city like Nanyuan, most of the products being sold were at the level of the great strength realm. Rarely any products at the level of infinite strength realm could be found here. Demon flesh section. A beautiful and well-trained young woman flashed Su Yu a warm smile and asked, "How may I help you, sir?" Iron-winged bird blood. Iron-winged bird. The woman gave it a thought before asking, regular blood or blood essence? An iron-winged bird was massive, so it would have a large amount of blood in its body. But only several drops of blood essence could be extracted from one iron-winged bird. The rest of the harvest would be regular blood that did not have much uses, unlike the blood essence that was quite useful. Su Yu did not know what he needed either. After a slight hesitation, he said, "Can you show me both?" "Sure thing." The woman did not question him. Iron-winged birds weren't a rare race. They were commonly utilized by the various races at the all-heaven battlefield as an air force. If Su Yu was looking for the blood of a more powerful flying race instead, he might not be able to find any in Nanyuan. Shortly after, a male employee took out 2 glass bottles from a glass shelf and offered it to them. This is the regular blood and this is the blood essence. Both originated from a great strength iron-winged bird. Looking at Suyu, who was staring intently at the bottles, the woman smiled and explained, if you require the blood of an infinite strength iron-winged bird, you won't be able to find it at the Nanyuan branch. You can only find some at the capital. This will do. Suyu wouldn't be able to make use of the blood from an infinite strength iron-winged bird. Even if he could use it, he wouldn't be willing to spend the money for it. What's the price? $5,000 for a bottle of regular blood. It's very cheap. As for the blood essence, it is slightly higher in price. After all, less than 10 drops of blood essence can be extracted from an adult iron-winged bird. We're selling them at $50,000 a drop. Suyu frowned. That was expensive. Great strength combatants are basically cannon fodder at the all-heaven battlefield. A large number of them will die every single day. Why is 1 drop of blood essence from a cannon fodder so expensive? The woman maintained the same smile on her face and said, "You're right, sir. But transporting the blood essence from the all-heaven battlefield to Great Xia is an extremely expensive endeavor. We need to deal with numerous procedures such as extracting, conserving, selling, taxation, and so on. 50,000 per drop is really not that expensive, all things considered. The blood essence of a great strength iron-winged bird is naturally not worth much at the all-heaven battlefield. It is common enough that you might even be able to randomly stumble upon some if you're lucky enough. However, this is not the all-heaven battlefield." Suyu sank into silence. She was right. Blood essence of great strength beasts was of little value at the all-heaven battlefield. More importantly, who would have the time to go around harvesting blood essence during a battle? And even if one could harvest some, how would one deliver the blood essence back? Only a trade company like the Great Xia Trade Company with a powerful backing was capable of transporting materials obtained from the battlefield back to Great Xia. With the amount of effort required for transportation, it was understandable that the materials would be expensive. "Give me a bottle of regular blood and a drop of blood essence." It was very difficult for Suyu to part with his wealth. He was fortunate that his father wasn't around. Otherwise, he would probably suffer an intense whooping from his father for wasting so much money for some blood. "Sure thing. Card or cash?" "Card." Suyu's expression remained the same, but inwardly, he was feeling terrible. $55,000 had been spent in total. Just like that, about 1/6 of the money his father had spent so many years saving was gone. This is only a guess. If the blood doesn't work, then this would be a massive loss. At that thought, Suyu hurriedly asked, "By the way, do you buy back the blood you sold here?" The woman blanked out slightly before replying with a smile, "Yes, we do. 1,000 per bottle of regular blood and 10,000 per drop of blood essence." Suyu had the urge to curse. What a greedy business. Even if the Great Xia Trade Company was owned by Xia Longwu's family, he still couldn't resist cursing it. Buying back at 1/5 the price? What a scam. Suyu decided to let it go. The employees here were only doing what they were told. It was not like they were the decision makers. It was pointless to argue with them. After swiping his card, Suyu was given a box with 2 glass bottles inside. In one of the bottles, a drop of golden blood could be seen. It was as though the drop of blood was constantly swirling in the bottle, and if one looked carefully, one could even see the vague image of a soaring iron-winged bird in the drop of blood. So that was the so-called blood essence. The blood essence of these demonic races could more or less be helpful for one's cultivation when consumed. For example, the blood essence of an iron-winged bird would enhance the physical body of a great strength cultivator upon consumption. For the human race, only after progressing beyond the source opening realm would one be considered a proper cultivator. The realm after the source opening realm was the great strength realm, a realm focusing on the cultivation of one's physical body. Blood essence might be helpful for great strength cultivators, but it was useless for source opening cultivators. In fact, it might even be harmful for those in the source opening realm. The cases of bodies exploding after bathing in the blood of divines and devils wouldn't have happened otherwise. Before opening the 9 acupoints, one would be unable to circulate the source chi within one's body. Blind accumulation without circulation was the same as consuming poison. A natural treasure like the heavenly source fruit was born out of pure heavenly source chi, so it was rather mild in effect, unlike regular source chi that was much harsher to digest. While Suyu was deep in thought, the woman reminded him, "Sir, if you're not at the great strength realm yet, you can't use the iron-winged bird blood essence. It would be too dangerous. I know. Thanks. Suyu casually asked, do you have heavenly source fruits here? What? The woman blanked out before quickly recovering. My apologies. We don't. In fact, I've never heard of that fruit before. Suyu did not mind. There were countless races in existence, and that was also the case for the natural treasures that could be found in the various realms. It would be unfair to expect a salesperson to know about every single treasure in existence. For them, it would be good enough to know about the products they were selling. What about source chi liquid? We don't have that as well. Source chi liquid is quite hard to store as it can dissipate very easily. The cost of storage is too high, said the salesperson. You can get some at the capital. In fact, we used to sell it here a few years ago. However, sales were low due to the high pricing, so we stopped restocking. Oh. What's the price of source chi liquid? At the capital, you can get them for 100,000 per drop, but I'm not sure if the price has changed recently. The salesperson went on to suggest, Sir, are you trying to accelerate your source opening cultivation? In truth, we have many treasures and pills here that might be helpful for that. For example, we have fire-suckling blood, source opening pill. Suyu rolled his eyes. Did she really think that he was some clueless fool? Sure, those things were helpful, but they were only a tiny bit helpful. If one's original cultivation speed was quantified at 100 points, then using these things would probably increase the speed by 1 point. He was already aware of those methods, but only a fool would waste their money on them. After spending tens of thousands on those methods, he would probably only gain an equivalent of 1 extra day of cultivation after a whole month. It wasn't like he was so rich that he didn't know what to do with his money. Naturally, there were still people that would buy those things. Otherwise, production would have ceased a long time ago. In fact, those things were actually quite popular as they weren't too expensive if bought in small quantities. Suyu did not ask more and left with his box. He had successfully obtained the blood he was there for. However, he did not know if it would be useful. He could still resell the blood if it proved useless provided that he still had some left. Granted, he would suffer a great loss doing so, but that was still better than losing his entire investment. Back at the neighborhood, below the apartment, Chen Hao was waiting downstairs for Suyu. When he saw that Suyu was also returning home so early in the morning, he asked curiously, where did you go? I went shopping. Oh. Let's go to school. No. Indignation spread across Chen Hao's face. No? Wasn't Suyu the one who had insisted on going to school the day before? Why had he changed his mind? I'm going to self-study at home. Suyu smiled. Go ahead. Remember to cultivate well at school. Try to reach the 4th stage as soon as possible. Like Suyu, Chen Hao was also a 3rd stage source opening cultivator. Unfortunately, Chen Hao was incapable of entering the cultural research and scientific research academies. If he failed to enter a war academy as well, he would be forced to enter an internal affairs academy. Suyu stopped Chen Hao from nagging and expended quite a lot of effort before he finally managed to convince Chen Hao to leave. In the living room, Suyu was staring at the 2 bottles of blood with a deep frown. He had the blood with him. But how was he supposed to use them? Should I swallow them? The blood of a beast at the great strength realm won't cause my body to explode, but it will still harm my body. Or should I wait for the iron-winged bird to appear in my dream again? But it had only appeared once over a period of over 10 years. Am I supposed to wait 10 more years for a second appearance? Suyu was troubled. He had been full of excitement before purchasing the blood. It hadn't been easy for him to get a clue about his dreams. He had already decided to even swallow the blood if he had to, but now that he had the blood in hand, he started hesitating. If the blood really ended up injuring him, it would hurt badly. Or should I be smearing the blood over my skin? Suyu immediately gave it a try. There shouldn't be any problem as long as he didn't swallow the blood. Opening the bottle of regular blood, he dipped a finger inside before smearing the blood on the back of his hand. Then, he sat there waiting. A few minutes later, Suyu started frowning. Nothing was happening. The blood smeared on his skin was slowly drying out. This blood was $5,000 per bottle. If one consumed a tiny amount of it on a daily basis, it would help with improving one's health. It would be too much of a waste to just let the blood dry away. If this isn't working, maybe I should try consuming some? He licked the blood on the back of his hand and sat waiting once again. Alas, nothing happened as well. Is the regular blood not doing anything, or am I using it wrong? Or have I completely misinterpreted the dream? Suyu was vexed. He had spent tens of thousands of dollars for this. Had he been too rash? But he had been tortured by those dreams for way too many years. He wanted nothing more than to solve the issue immediately. Tens of thousands of dollars was a price he was willing to pay if it would really work. Staring at the drop of blood essence, Suyu couldn't bring himself to use it. He only had a single drop of these. The drop of blood was as hard as a precious stone. He couldn't even split it into smaller portions. He would have to directly swallow it, as smearing it against his skin would not be an option here. Do I really need to swallow it? I'm only at the source opening realm. If I take it, I'll either die or suffer grievous injuries. I already have very little hope of reaching the 4th stage. If I hurt myself here, my cultivation level might even drop lower than it already is. Suyu couldn't make up his mind. Due to the years of torture he had suffered, he had developed a calm and steadfast personality. He wasn't the type of person to take risks. If it wasn't for the fact that his father had joined the battlefield, he wouldn't even think of joining a war academy. The dreams had tortured him for too many years. He wanted badly to solve the mystery behind his dreams. Just one drop, that probably won't kill. Should I try it? What's the worst that could happen? If I really get myself injured by this, I can just not enter a war academy. It's not like I stand much chance with my 3rd stage cultivation level anyway. And for cultural research academies, it wouldn't matter even if I'm only at the 1st stage. Suyu stared at the golden blood before him. It appeared rather bright to his eyes. After some hesitation, he poured the drop of blood out. It was as solid as a stone and was actually rather heavy. He tried squeezing the drop of blood, but nothing changed. Should I wait one more day and see what happens after another dream? Maybe a different monster would need the iron-winged bird's blood as well? Or the iron-winged bird's blood would only work today. Every day around midnight, he would dream of a different monster. If he missed the window to use this drop of blood, just how long would he have to wait for the same bird to reappear? The bird might not even appear anymore in his life. Or maybe it would take decades to reappear. He grew so anxious that his breathing grew heavier. In that case, I'll give it a try. At worst, I'll suffer some injuries and just enter a cultural research academy instead of a war academy. I'll focus on studying the myriad races at the Cultural Research Academy. A day will come when I eventually solve the mystery behind my dreams. His chances of entering a war academy were low anyway. The prospect of solving his dreams was attractive enough that he was willing to risk his rather low chance of admittance into a war academy. Clenching his teeth, he finally reached a decision. Also, solving the mystery behind his dreams might even bring him an unexpected reward. With the blood essence in one hand and his communicator in his other hand, he quickly typed a message, "Come to my house. I've something to tell you. If I'm not answering the door, break in." The message was sent to Chen Hao. If he really ended up injured or losing his consciousness before he could seek help, Chen Hao would be around to send him to the hospital. After doing that, Suyu clenched his teeth and swallowed the drop of blood. At worst, he would suffer some injuries. Was he someone who was afraid of pain? Ah. A miserable wail rang out the moment that thought crossed Suyu's mind. He nearly teared up from the pain. Boom. Next, a boom erupted within his mind as he fainted. Moonlight. The massive iron-winged bird reappeared. This scene was so similar to the scene from the previous night, yet dissimilar at the same time. This was something that had never happened before. The monsters from his dreams had never appeared twice. Today, that had happened. The iron-winged bird had reappeared. Chapter 7, Book Activation. Moonlight. The massive iron-winged bird shrieked. This time, the dream was much clearer. Suyu was able to see the appearance of the bird clearly. What was different about this dream was the existence of a massive drop of golden blood hovering in the air. That was the blood essence he had consumed. The iron-winged bird that was originally busy chasing after Suyu seemed distracted. When it laid its eyes on the golden blood, the bird blanked out. It stopped chasing Suyu and started flying toward the golden blood instead. It flew rapidly and instantly reached its target. After a shriek, it swallowed the drop of blood. Boom. Resplendent radiance erupted from the iron-winged bird, making it look like a bright sun that illuminated the entire dreamland. Sure enough, the blood essence was useful. Suyu waited in anticipation. What would happen next? The iron-winged bird suddenly started enlarging uncontrollably, looking like it was about to burst apart. Suyu's expression changed. With a rumble, the iron-winged bird exploded into countless golden dots of light that spread everywhere in the air. The dreamland started collapsing, and even Suyu's body was torn apart due to the explosion. At the final moment before the dreamland collapsed completely, a massive book appeared in the air. The pages of the book started flipping over rapidly. All the pages were blank. Eventually, the flipping stopped at one blank page and the golden dots dove into it, instantly lighting that page up. An illustration of an iron-winged bird appeared on the blank page. That was the point the dream ended and Suyu woke up in reality. Hiss. His head was hurting so much, he wondered if it was going to burst apart. In fact, his entire body was hurting, as though he had really been blasted apart in reality. His eyes flickered in excitement as he seemed to have finally deciphered his dream. At that moment, a faintly discernible book could be seen in his mind. That was the same book that had appeared in the dream. From dream to reality. Suyu's expression turned solemn. After so many years of torture, he should be happy to finally decipher his dreams. But why would something from a dream appear outside of it? The book that had absorbed the iron-winged bird's blood essence had actually appeared in his mind. Was that an image, or was there really a book within his head? As Suyu gazed inwardly at the book, he tried controlling the book with his mind. The pages of the book started flipping. Before long, he arrived at the page that had been illuminated by the iron-winged bird. Iron-winged bird, 7th stage Great Strength Realm. Racial abilities, Tier 1 RIP, activate with blood essence, Iron Wing / activate with blood essence. Foundation Source Art, Source Swallowing, activate with blood essence. There were only a few words on the page. Those weren't written in the human language. Rather, they were written in the iron-winged bird language. If Suyu had not learned the language before, he would not be able to read this page. 7th stage Great Strength, Racial Ability, Foundation Source Art. Suyu frowned. What was that book? Looking at the contents of the page, was he supposed to consume more blood essence for activation? Activate? What was he supposed to activate? Those abilities? 7th stage Great Strength probably referred to the strength of the iron-winged bird the blood essence had been extracted from. That was easily understandable. But what about the rest of the words? What did they mean? Numerous thoughts crossed Suyu's mind. Will I be able to unlock the abilities of the iron-winged bird race as long as I have enough blood essence? But will I even be able to use the activated abilities? Even if I can, how strong will those abilities be when activated by me? Will it be at the level of 3rd stage Source Opening or 7th stage Great Strength? How long will the abilities stay activated? Are there any side effects? Where did this book come from? Suyu's eyes flickered as he sank into thought. These dreams had started over 10 years ago. Was it possible that this book had stayed in his mind for that long as well? If so, who was the one who had planted the book in his mind? Was there some sort of conspiracy? There were countless races in existence. Could this be a scheme by one of them with the intention of using him to sow chaos among humanity? He couldn't help considering that possibility. After all, there were some extremely treacherous races out there. In fact, something like that had happened in the human realm before. There was one incident where numerous human experts fell into the machinations of the enemy and were eventually enticed into becoming the members of the Myriad race cult. But humanity has a population of tens of billions. I am as ordinary as a human can get. Even if they have to plot and scheme, is there a need to use the plan on me? Especially a plan that would take over 10 years? Suyu still couldn't find a proper explanation for the book in his mind. He couldn't resist giving it a try. Also, that was quite a thick book. He had only activated a single page so far. Was it possible that he could activate the other pages as well? While deep in thought, Suyu suddenly sensed a burst of undulations. He blanked out as he realized that the undulations were coming from the book. The book was actually conversing with him. However, the conversation wasn't made through words. Instead, the answer was somehow being mentally projected into his mind. Yes, I can activate the other pages. As long as it is a race that I've dreamed about, I can activate the corresponding page with the correct blood essence. But I'm only at the source opening realm. I need to take my body into consideration when consuming blood essence. In fact, Suyu was feeling like his body was on the verge of exploding right this moment. It was extremely painful. After all, he had consumed the blood essence of a 7th stage great strength iron-winged bird. If it had been the blood of an infinite strength realm bird instead, Suyu would have probably been crippled if not killed by now. I see, muttered Suyu to himself. He finally understood. Over the years, he had been dreaming of a different race every night. As for the book in its mind, it wasn't something that had appeared due to the iron-winged bird's blood essence. Rather, as long as he had the blood essence of any race he had dreamed of, he would be able to activate the book. Unfortunately, Suyu had not been able to recognize the races that he had dreamed of in the past. Additionally, he was only a 3rd stage source opening cultivator. He wouldn't randomly swallow a drop of blood essence for no reason at his cultivation level. If he hadn't been able to understand the words of the iron-winged bird in his dream, he wouldn't have taken this risk either. After all, doing this at his cultivation was dangerous enough to kill him if he was careless or unlucky. Foundation Source Art, Source Swallowing. Suddenly, Suyu noticed the 3rd row of the words in the page. The source swallowing technique was the foundation art of the iron-winged bird race. It only had one usage, source chi absorption. Source swallowing technique, activate with blood essence? Suyu's eyes lit up. What does this mean? Will I be able to activate this technique with blood essence and start absorbing source chi with it? But those in the source opening realm aren't supposed to be able to actively absorb source chi. They can only cultivate passively. He did not care much about the racial abilities. Rip and Ironwing / were the basic abilities of the iron-winged bird race. That was something the human race was aware of. Blood essence activation might allow Suyu to learn those abilities, and he might even be able to use them at the level of a 7th stage great strength bird. Even so, he still didn't care much about those abilities. His attention was completely on the source swallowing technique. That technique could be activated with blood essence as well. What did that mean? Before the great strength realm, humans were not able to actively absorb source chi. The source opening codex could only help humans gather a tiny bit of source chi and slightly increase the ambient source chi density around them, increasing the efficiency of their passive cultivation. Source swallowing technique. Suyu couldn't help but to grow excited. If he could really activate the source swallowing technique, did that not mean that he would be able to actively absorb source chi at the source opening realm? It took a long time for a human to open the 9 acupoints. The main reason for that was their inability to actively absorb source chi. That was because humans were not born with interlinked acupoints. What would happen if a human gained the ability to actively absorb source chi at the source opening realm? But, I still don't know if there are any side effects. How efficient will the active absorption be? And how many drops of blood essence would I need to activate the technique? If I only use 1 drop, how long will the technique stay active? How good would the technique be? This shit is very expensive. I'll need to spend 50,000 per drop. If each drop would last only several minutes, it wouldn't be worth it. Numerous possibilities appeared in Suyu's mind. Additionally, there were also the other pages in the book that would also require activation with more drops of blood essence. How was he supposed to get his hands on so many drops of blood essence? There were too many things to consider. Suyu suddenly felt like he did not have enough mental capacity to think about all that. Perhaps I should test it out. Also, where did this book come from? Should I ask the teachers about it? After some thought, Suyu rejected that notion. Even if that book was really planted by someone else, his teachers wouldn't know anything. They were too weak compared to someone capable of such a feat. After all, the book had remained undetected for over 10 years. Even those at the Skysoar realm might not be able to do anything about it, never mind those at the Great Strength and Infinite Strength realms. Sitting here thinking won't change anything. It's better for me to perform some tests. Just as Suyu was busy thinking, a loud noise erupted from the door. Next, Chen Hao burst through the door waving his school bag while roaring, "I've notified the Windcatcher department. Feel free to stay if you're not afraid of death. We have experts all around the apartment. You better piss off if you know what's good for you." Suyu was speechless. After Chen Hao's shout, noises started coming from the apartment units upstairs and downstairs. Before long, someone living upstairs shouted, "What's going on? Are the animals from the Myriad race cult here? Audacious. Surround them." Suyu stopped blanking out and hurriedly shouted, "It's fine. It's fine. Grandpa Zhou, it's Qin Hao playing a joke on me. I'm sorry." Soon, an old man rushed over with a cleaver in hand. After pushing Qin Hao, who was standing before the door, aside and checking that Suyu was fine, he breathed out in relief and said, "I thought the bastards from the Myriad race cult were here. Your father is not around anymore, so you need to be careful. Feel free to look for us if you encounter any trouble." Then, he slapped Qin Hao on the back of his head. "You. Who told you to start shouting? Don't go around shouting for no reason. What if we think you're lying the next time you ask for help when the Myriad race cult bastards are really here? Wouldn't that be terrible?" The old man was furious. However, his anger was only directed toward Qin Hao. "Kid, if you dare to raise a false alarm again, I'll have your father drag you downstairs and hang you naked before whooping your ass." Qin Hao had a sullen expression. He really wanted to explain that this wasn't his idea. It was Suyu's idea. That fellow had suddenly sent such a message to him. How could he not be worried? This really wasn't his fault. Suyu stood up. His body was still in pain, but it was bearable. A majority of the blood essence had probably been absorbed by the book. Thus, his body had only absorbed a tiny bit of the blood's power and was only suffering from some pain instead of actual injuries. He ignored his pain and hurriedly apologized to Grandpa Zhou. Grandpa Zhou had a gratified smile on his face as he listened to Suyu. At the end, he did not forget to give Qin Hao's head another slap. "Just look at you. Why are you so different from this Su kid? Compared to him, you're so dumb." Qin Hao felt like crying. Suyu was also feeling helpless. He remembered something and hurriedly asked, "Did you contact the Windcatcher department?" "No. I was bluffing," Qin Hao replied sulkily. He wasn't sure if something had really happened, so he hadn't actually notified the Windcatcher department. "Good." Suyu breathed out in relief. Qin Hao said unhappily, "What's so good about that? Also, why did you send me a message like that? I thought something bad happened to you." When the crowd of grandpas and grandmas that had gathered outside saw that everything was fine, they left. Suyu breathed out in relief and dragged Qin Hao back into his home. After shutting the door, he said, "I was feeling dizzy earlier, so I was afraid I would faint. That was why I sent you that message. Didn't I tell you to knock first?" "Oh, you're fine?" Qin Hao did not pursue the matter. Instead, he asked worriedly, "Did you starve yourself? Uncle Su is gone, so you're out of food? You should come eat at my place in the future. My dad even told me to invite you over the other day. I didn't tell you because I was worried that you would be embarrassed." Suyu did not know whether to laugh or cry. Was he stupid enough to starve himself? Nevertheless, he was still moved. This fellow could be noisy and simple-minded at times, but he was still a good friend to have. "I'm fine. I spent too long cultivating the source opening codex last night, so I was feeling unwell in the morning. I'm fine now." "That's good to hear." Qin Hao was relieved. "So are you going to school today? Why don't you call in sick? While you're at it, tell the school that I'm accompanying you for a checkup and get a leave of absence for me as well." Suyu was no longer feeling as moved. He had nothing to say to this fellow. So it turned out that Qin Hao wanted to skip class but did not have the guts to do it. Therefore, he was trying to get Suyu to get a leave of absence for him instead. "Piss off." Suyu scolded with a laugh. "I'm not skipping today. I have something to do at school." "You're going to school today?" Qin Hao found himself confused. Why was this fellow changing his mind all the time? He was the one who had refused to go previously. But now, he wanted to go? Was this how the brains of all smart people worked? They would change their mind all the time? Suyu couldn't be bothered to explain himself. He wanted to see if there were any ways he could get some iron-winged bird blood from the school. Or maybe he could find a cheaper source of blood essence from school. After all, the Xia Trade Company was too greedy. At 50,000 per drop, there wasn't much he could do with the small amount of money Su Long left behind. Chapter 8, Spark of Civilization. At Nanyuan Secondary School, Qin Hao went to class as he couldn't afford to skip any lessons while Suyu went straight to the resource department. "Suyu, you want to trade for some iron-winged bird blood essence?" The managing teacher of the resource department asked in astonishment. The blood essence of a great strength bird would only be helpful for those at the great strength realm. For source-opening cultivators, it would be poisonous instead of helpful. What do you need the blood for? Can I trade for it, Teacher Zhang? Suyu asked with a smile. You know I've been researching the myriad races. The iron-winged bird is one of the races I have been researching, so I hope to get some of their blood to assist in my research. However, the blood essence is really too expensive. That's why I'm trying my luck here. Yes, you can. You've been certified for 18 different languages over the years. Apart from the 3 compulsory languages, you've been rewarded 15 merit points for the other 15 languages. You've also been awarded 3 points for reaching the 3rd stage source opening realm, adding up to a total of 18 merit points. After checking the records, the managing teacher continued. However, you had spent 6 points at the library, so you have 12 points left. Yeah, I know. Suyu smiled. How many drops of iron-winged bird blood essence can I get with my remaining 12 points? You're trading your merit points for blood essence? It's really not worth it. You won't be able to do much with the blood essence. The teacher couldn't help advising Suyu. A great strength iron-winged bird is too strong for you even if they are at the bottom of the barrel at the all-heaven battlefield. Your merit points can be used in your future academy as well. You can even get valuable resources from the academy with your points. While you're still in secondary school, you can earn these points easily. Just mastering one language is enough to get you 1 point. But that won't be the case in the academy. It's really not worth using your points for something like this. At the academy, you can obtain restricted knowledge, high-tier cultivation methods, and even access to some limited courses with your points. In fact, the points can even be used in the army. Yeah, I know all that. But I really have no other choice here. Suyu smiled helplessly. He knew all that. He could only fault himself for not having enough money. Sure, he had the money to buy even 5 drops of blood essence if he wanted, but that would empty his bank account. He still needed to keep some money for his daily expenses. As he wouldn't be able to make a living as a source-opening cultivator, he also had to account for his expenses in his future academy. The so-called merit point was a different sort of currency. It was one of the most valuable currency systems in use apart from the onping dollar. The onping dollar could be used to purchase a lot of things. However, it was also restricted from purchasing a lot of things. High-tier strategic resources, high-tier cultivation methods, and some limited inheritances could only be purchased with merit points. The merit point system was basically an unit of measurement for one's contribution to humanity. Without proper contribution to humanity, you would still be limited in what you could purchase regardless of how wealthy you were. Every single point spent and earned would be recorded. For example, even after spending all 18 of his merit points, Suyu's original earned merit would still remain at 18 points. Any new points earned would be added on top of it instead of his leftover merit points. At 100 original earned merit, Suyu would obtain an even higher level of clearance. That was a system put in place to stop wealthy individuals from purchasing merit points with money and gaining access to high clearance resources with their wealth alone. For example, a tycoon who had purchased tens of thousands of merit points would still be limited in what they could purchase without sufficient original earned merit. The resource managing teacher sighed and said, "Fine, I won't stop you. But it is still too early for you to conduct these researches. There isn't much Nanyuan Secondary School could do to support your research. When you're in an academy, you will be able to apply for a subsidy for your research. You might even receive sponsorships. The iron-winged birds are too common, so they're not worth researching. If you ask me, it's better to research something else instead." Suyu smiled. You know what, teacher? I agree. Are there any ox-faced fish blood essence here? The teacher replied awkwardly, Well, we don't have that here. Those fellows reside in the Mount Root realm and are rarely found at the All-Heaven battlefield. Furthermore, they wouldn't enter the All-Heaven battlefield before reaching the Infinite Strength realm or even the Skysoar realm. You can find their blood in the cultural research academies, but not here. What was the point of saying all that then? Suyu was able to recognize a few of the races that had appeared in his dreams before. The ox-faced fish was one of them. However, the weakest ox-faced fish on the All-Heaven battlefield was at the Infinite Strength realm. If he consumed an Infinite Strength blood essence at his current cultivation, his body would probably burst apart even with the book absorbing the majority of the blood essence's energy. As for the blood essence of the races he was unsure about, he wouldn't dare consume them. The moment he consumed the blood essence of a wrong race, his body would probably suffer as his book wouldn't be absorbing the blood essence of a race that had yet to appear in his dream. Thus, the iron-winged bird was still the safest choice for him currently. Teacher, I'll just get some iron-winged bird blood essence. How many drops do you want? You need to spend 1 merit point per drop. It's really not worth it. The teacher persuaded, you might feel like these merit points aren't that valuable, what with the exchange rate of $50,000 per point, but there are things that can't be measured with money alone. You know what I mean. Thank you for the reminder, teacher. Suyu nodded before immediately adding, I'll get 3 drops for now. I'll come back if I need more. The teacher felt helpless seeing how stubborn Suyu was. He could only get a staff to retrieve the said blood essence. While waiting for the staff to return, he said, the school is aware that your father went to the All-Heaven battlefield 2 days ago. Be careful when you're home alone. Those fellows from the Myriad Race Cult are currently active in Great Xia. I'm sure you're aware of that. Yeah, I know. But their activity in Great Xia won't affect me, right? How can you say that? The teacher chided, you never know what could happen. Those animals from the Myriad Race Cult do not primarily aim for experts or genius cultivators. Rather, they generally target the sages. Sure, you're no sage, but you're one of the few students in Nanyuan Secondary School with a guaranteed spot in the cultural research academies. There is a limit to the amount of damage a combat expert can cause. However, there is no limit to what a sage can do. Humanity has survived for hundreds of years at the All-Heaven battlefield by relying not only on the experts alone, but also on the sages supporting us behind the front line. In fact, you wouldn't be considered a top-tier researcher of a cultural research academy if you haven't been a target of assassination before. These researchers are in charge of analyzing the cultivation methods of the myriad races and studying their civilizations, allowing humanity to increase the number of experts in their ranks and gain the strength to face the myriad races. Reverence seeped into the teacher's face as he continued, the contributions they make behind the scenes are no less than what those combat experts are capable of. Unfortunately, a lot of these researchers lack the required strength. Thus, even staying behind the front line, they are commonly targeted by the Myriad Race Cult. Assassinations are a common occurrence for them. All the disturbances caused by the Myriad Race Cult are not for the sake of assassinating our combat experts. Instead, those researchers are the primary targets. You have yet to join a cultural research academy and have yet to master a lot of languages. But taking your age into consideration, you're a far more attractive target than the students who are talented in terms of combat. In fact, even the cultivation geniuses at 4th or 5th stage source opening realm might not be worth the time of the Myriad Race Cult members. How long would someone in the source opening realm take to reach the Skysoar realm? In comparison, a sage would require only a decade or 2 to fully decipher a cultivation method and identify its weakness before coming up with efficient ways to counter the users of said cultivation method. Such an individual is far more dangerous than a Skysoar realm expert. Suyu smiled helplessly. That was too much of an exaggeration, right? He might have mastered 18 languages, but that was a very small number compared to the number of races in existence. Also, he had only mastered the more common ones. Don't look down on the threat of the Myriad Race Cult. Be careful and watch your back. Be sure to seek help when you encounter danger. We have increased the security measures within Nanyuan. Even the Windcatcher Department and the Martial Dragon Guards stationed here have been deployed. In the event of danger, just start shouting. It will only take dozens of seconds for help to arrive. Seeing how serious the teacher was, Suyu nodded and said, Don't worry, teacher. I know. Nanyuan is a small city. Those fellows might not come here after all. And if they do come here, in all honesty, I doubt I'll be their priority. Yeah, you're right. The teacher smiled. But you should still be careful, especially when you're with Instructor Liu. Huh? Suyu was confused. Instructor Liu. No, don't get this wrong. Instructor Liu is the best instructor in Nanyuan Secondary School. Most of our students who have managed to enter the cultural research academies were taught by him. If the Myriad Race Cult is really here, Instructor Liu will be their biggest target. Instead of the mayor or the school principal, he will be the first person to be assassinated. Instructor Liu is a spark of civilization. At the very least, that's the case for Nanyuan. That's why you need to watch your back when you're with him. Suyu's expression changed. Teacher, would Instructor Liu be fine? Don't worry about him. The school principal is personally protecting Instructor Lu. Even the martial dragon guards are protecting him in secret. A team has also been sent over from the Windcatcher department. I'm only reminding you to be careful while you're on your way to Instructor Lu's place. Suyu was relieved to hear that. This Instructor Lu was his main teacher, the person who had taught him the majority of the 18 languages he knew. As mentioned by the resource managing teacher, Instructor Lu might not be anything special in the entirety of Great Xia, but for a small city like Nanyuan and for Nanyuan Secondary School, he was worthy of being called a spark of civilization. He had been teaching for many years. Over 100 of his former students had managed to join the various cultural research academies. Of these students, about half of them had been able to graduate from the academies, each occupying an important position in Great Xia. These lower-level individuals weren't anything special compared to the top experts, but they were also what humanity relied on for its continued existence. If the Myriad race cult was really in Nanyuan, it would definitely be more likely for Instructor Lu to be their target instead of the mayor. Finally, the staff arrived with the requested iron-winged bird's blood essence. 3 drops. After the purchase, Suyu only had 9 merit points left. His heart ached at the thought of spending his points like this. After all, he had only spent 6 points over the years to obtain countless information from the library. It was a truly luxurious act to be spending 3 points in one go. Accepting the bottle of blood essence, Suyu asked, "Teacher, has Instructor Lu been coming to the school these few days?" "Yes, he's coming in as usual. He was told to stay at the mayor's place until the danger is over, but he refused." "I see. I'll pay him a visit." Suyu had intended to return home immediately and give the blood essence a try, but he changed his mind. He wanted to visit Instructor Lu and ask the instructor some questions. Chapter 9, The Capabilities of Cultural Research Academies, 1. Instructor's Office. Lu Wenyan, a man over 60 years old, was writing as he spoke without looking up. "Principal, you don't have to follow me around. We're in school. I'll be fine." Sitting nearby, the principal, also a man of over 60 years old, smiled and replied, "It's not like I'm disturbing you. Why are you chasing me away? You're disturbing me by merely breathing." The principal did not know whether to laugh or cry. Lu Wenyan continued speaking, "Also, you're a fresh infinite strength cultivator. You're too weak. What can you even do here?" The principal was speechless. Was he really that weak? Yeah, maybe. A brand new infinite strength realm at over 60 years old was really nothing special. However, this was Nanyuan, the smallest of the 28 cities within Great Xia. He wasn't even the mayor. He was only the principal of a secondary school. There was no need for him to be too strong. A real expert would either be at the capital or the all-heaven battlefield. In Nanyuan, he could actually be considered strong. "Hey, you think I enjoy doing this," complained the old principal. "I'm only here because you're too important, you old bag of bones." Over the past 20 years, a total of 320 students from Nanyuan had managed to enter the various cultural research academies. On average, there were about 16 of them per year. Half of them were taught by you. Isn't it obvious that you would stick out like a sore thumb for those fellows from the Myriad race cult? You're exaggerating. Lu Wenyan laughed. This is a small city. There is a limit to the number of students we can send to the academies. The number of students we have are nothing compared to the other cities in Great Xia. Why would the Myriad race cult waste their time on me? You never know. In any case, you're more important than me. I'm a weak infinite strength cultivator. They won't even spare me a glance. The principal might be speaking with a joking tone, but that was the truth. An infinite strength cultivator wasn't weak, but it still wasn't strong enough to be of much use at a place like the all-heaven battlefield. The Myriad race cult would still have to sacrifice a few members to kill an infinite strength cultivator behind the front line. It was simply not worth it, especially when the target was an old man over 60 years old. Suddenly, the principal's ears moved as he smiled and said, "Suyu is here. This kid is much better than his father. Don't belittle Su Long. What did he do? He only rejected your offer to become a guard at the school. Do you have to hold a grudge over that?" Lu Wenyan also smiled. He finally looked up and said, "Su Long still has his passion. I've long noticed that he was unwilling to live out the rest of his life as a retiree. He had been trying to join the martial dragon guards and was only forced to give up after being rejected. The principal snorted and said, it's clear he stood no chance of joining them. A 9th stage great strength cultivator below 30 might still be able to join, but him? At his age? Maybe he would stand a better chance if he was a 9th stage infinite strength cultivator instead. Even so, he's much better than you. If he can survive the all-heaven battlefield, he'll probably return as an infinite strength cultivator in a few years. Lu Wenyan continued, Suyu is decent as well. He might not be a super genius, but he will still be able to join the ranks of the regular researchers contributing to the survival of humanity after entering the Great Siok Cultural Research Academy. Both of them are much better than you and me. The principal nodded with a sigh. If I hadn't harmed my foundation at the all-heaven battlefield back then, I wouldn't have retired from the army and become a principal here. This is such a boring job. Rejoice that you were able to return alive. Very few soldiers at the all-heaven battlefield could keep their foundations unharmed. At a dangerous place like that, they will have to forcefully rise beyond the 7th stage great strength realm or they would be too weak to even serve as cannon fodder. Lu Wenyan couldn't help but to sigh. A majority of the soldiers at the all-heaven battlefield would have no hope of reaching the Skyso realm. There was nothing they could do about it. That was a hellish place with desperate battles occurring at all times. New soldiers would die in only a few days unless they forcefully break through in their cultivation. Cultivation Foundation would be the last thing on their minds when their lives were on the line. The more talented individuals would be recruited into the various war academies, leaving the less talented ones to struggle for survival in the army. While the two were speaking, Suyu stepped into the office. A bright smile instantly appeared on Lu Wenyan's face. Suyu was a student he was very satisfied with. This young man was a hardworking and patient student. He might not be a super genius, but humanity needed more than geniuses to prosper. Good seedlings willing to advance one step at a time like this were also important to have. Instructor, principal, greeted Suyu after entering the office. Suyu, you're here. Lu Wenyan smiled, looking much friendlier when he was facing Suyu. A wide smile was plastered on his face as he said, Your father has left for the all-heaven battlefield. Are you having any trouble living alone? No. I'm doing fine. Suyu shifted his tone and asked in a worried tone, Instructor, I heard that the Myriad Race cult will be here at Nanyuan. Don't worry. Lu Wenyan did not seem to care. We don't know if they'll be here for sure. Even if they're really here, what can they do? To make a move against me, they'll have to prepare to suffer a large number of casualties. It's not worth it. Lu Wenyan stood up and looked outside the window. He still had the same smile on his face as he said, when encountering major events, stay calm. Suyu, what I like most about you is your ability to stay calm and unruffled when encountering trouble. That is your advantage over others. Do not let a small issue like this disturb your state of mind. The principal smiled and walked out, leaving the two to their conversation. The moment the principal left, Lu Wenyan stopped smiling. He gestured at Suyu to sit down. Curious, Suyu did as told without asking anything. Suyu, I heard you registered for the war academies? Yes. You want to join a war academy, right? Suyu blanked out slightly. He quickly explained, No, I was only applying just in case. Stop lying to me. I'm not stupid. You're trying to enter the all-heaven battlefield because your father has gone there, right? Suyu sank into silence. Lu Wenyan smiled and said, Foolish. Even after joining a war academy, how long will it take for you to reach a sufficient level of cultivation to protect your father? Suyu sank into silence. He had thought of that before. However, he had been avoiding the question. In any case, with the book in his mind, things were no longer so certain. Can you name some super experts of our human race? Great Xia King, Great Zhou King, Great Ming King. Lu Wenyan nodded and said, How about those that have only emerged after the start of the Onping calendar? Before Suyu could answer, Lu Wenyan said with a smile, The most well-known among them are probably the prefects of the various prefectures and the commanders of the various armies. But do you know that 30% of these people came from the cultural research academies? Suyu was stunned. 30% of them came from cultural research academies? Weren't the cultural research academies in charge of? Lu Wenyan seemed to know what he was thinking. Do you think that everyone from the cultural research academies are like me? Someone that only knows some languages with incredibly weak combat strength? You're wrong. Lu Wenyan's face turned solemn. I've never told you this before because you're not yet at the point where you need to know all that. In truth, there are a lot of combat experts in the cultural research academies as well. In fact, some of their top experts are even stronger than those from the war academies. As the researchers of the myriad races, how can we be weak? If we're really that weak, how are we supposed to comprehend the more complicated cultivation methods of those races? Lu Wenyan had a burning gaze. I'm merely a useless failure of a student from a cultural research academy. Do you think that I'm really as weak as I look? Huh? Suyu opened his mouth to speak but hesitated. That was quite a shameless statement. After all, the instructor was only a 7th stage great strength cultivator. That was simply too weak. Do you want to say that I'm only a 7th stage great strength cultivator and I'm simply too weak? Suyu blinked, feeling like he had been seen through by his instructor. Yes, I can somewhat see what you're thinking. Suyu was instantly stunned. Shocked? Lu Wenyan smiled. You're too weak. Before me, you're completely defenseless. Take note to hide your thoughts better in the future. I'm telling you all this because I don't want you to only think about your short-term gains and give up on the cultural research academies. Lu Wenyan's expression turned stern as he said, I intended for you to learn all that after joining a cultural research academy. But now, I need to let you know in advance so that you don't make the wrong choice. There are countless paths one can take in cultivation. Different races would walk different paths. But it all comes down to the acts of absorbing source qi, refining one's body, and strengthening one's self. To strengthen oneself, there are 2 paths. Physical and willpower, also known as mental power. Willpower is a vague concept. It is very hard to grow strong walking that path. Thus, most people will grow their physical body first and only start cultivating their willpower upon reaching a certain level of strength. That isn't the case for us. A smile bloomed on Lu Wenyan's face. People like us have gained an open mind and powerful willpower through our study of the many different languages. Thus, we walk a different path. First, we strengthen our willpower. Then, we strengthen our physical body. With a formidable willpower, physical strengthening would be a simple task. That's not to say this is an easy path to take. Lu Wenyan's face turned strict again. When your willpower is strong enough, you'll be able to strengthen your body and allow it to absorb more source qi without being harmed. However, this path requires time and a much larger amount of resources. Some cultural researchers are capable of advancing from the great strength realm to the skysoar realm or even a higher realm within a single day upon reaching the stage where their willpower glows as bright as the sun. All paths lead to the same destination. The final goal of both cultural research academies and war academies is the same, to strengthen the individual and the human race. The body is easy to train, but willpower is extremely difficult to cultivate. The path of willpower cultivation is much harder to walk. That's why this information is not widespread among the public. We want to prevent the masses from overestimating themselves and walk the wrong path. Looking at the surprised Suyu, Lu Wenyan smiled and asked, surprised? It's not surprising at all. You're someone who has studied the myriad races as well. Although you still don't know much about them, you should still know a little. For example, the nightmare race whose language you know, is a race of illusory people that can hardly be seen with one's naked eyes. It is said that they have the ability to easily invade your dreams, but that's not the case. They are merely creating an illusory world with their willpower before drawing your mind in. That is why they are such a powerful race. Strictly speaking, the cultivation of cultural researchers is similar to theirs. Suyu was totally stunned. He softly asked, Instructor, are you saying that it is possible to gain strength through the path of cultural research? It's more than possible. It would be a faster path. Lu Wenyan explained, first, forge your willpower. Then, forge your body. Some geniuses in the cultural research academies are able to achieve willpower materialization after only 3 to 5 years in the academy and strengthen their bodies to reach the skysoar realm within a single day. Their subsequent progress in cultivation will also be much faster than physical cultivators. How about those from the war academies? How long will they take to reach the skysoar realm? Even a genius there will need many years of bitter training to reach that level. Of course, our path of cultivation is much harder than theirs. Therefore, there are less of us around. Only 30% of our super experts are from cultural research academies. From this, you can see how difficult it is to walk this path. Still trying to absorb all the information thrown his way, Suyu asked, so willpower can be cultivated? Yes. It's not something everyone can do? Correct. There are requirements for willpower cultivation. In fact, the requirements are higher than what you need for physical cultivation. Willpower is basically the same as mental power. It is something that can't be discerned or measured early on. In fact, the number of myriad race languages mastered can be used as a sort measuring stick for one's potential in willpower cultivation. For a lot of people, the reason they couldn't master too many languages is because of their weak willpower, not because they are not hardworking enough. You're able to master 18 different languages. Why can't more of your peers do so? Were they simply lazy? No. Some of them have actually worked hard, maybe even harder than you. But they just can't seem to master those languages. If they push themselves, they will find themselves suffering from an intense headache. That's all because of their weak willpower. They have no choice but to focus on their physical body first before working on their willpower. Suyu heaved a long breath and said, in that case, does my talent lie in willpower cultivation instead of physical body? You can say so. That's why the myriad races are so wary of cultural researchers. That's also why the myriad race cult will generally target our cultural researchers instead of physical cultivators. Before reaching a level where you can strengthen your body with your willpower, you're still very weak. This is the time when you're the most vulnerable. Chapter 10, The Capabilities of Cultural Research Academies, 2. Suyu was finding it hard to accept all that. This was the first time he had ever heard that cultural research was also a path of cultivation. In fact, I would have gone looking for you even if you're not here today. I won't stop you from looking for your father at the all-heaven battlefield. In fact, I'm glad to hear that. Human nature. Yes, that's how human nature works, and that's what humanity relies on to stand tall against the myriad races. However, you can't be rash. You must stay calm. The number of students accepted into cultural research academies each year is smaller than those accepted into war academies. It might also appear as if the cultural research academies have lower requirements, but in truth, the requirements are higher. Do you really think that the cultural research academies are only a gathering place for a bunch of bookworms? Lu Wenyan's smile grew wider as he said, no. We're not only capable of researching behind the front line, but we can also enter the battlefield and slaughter our enemies. Those among us who could enter the battlefield would be at least a Skysoar realm expert. Great strength? Infinite strength? Those are merely the realms where you refine your body with source chi. Us cultural researchers can finish that process in one day. Suyu froze. After a while, he finally asked, Instructor, why you're a Skysoar cultivator? No, Lu Wenyan replied indifferently. So you're stronger than that? No. Lu Wenyan had the same indifferent appearance. Suyu blanked out. What exactly was his instructor trying to say? I told you. Only upon willpower materialization will one be able to refine one's body. I'm not at that stage yet. That single statement made everything Lu Wenyan had spoken earlier seem like a joke. He had yet to materialize his willpower. He was really only a great strength cultivator. Suyu looked up at his instructor in astonishment. Old man, how can you say all that with a straight face? You're almost 70 for fuck's sake. You have yet to materialize your willpower yourself, but you're here telling me a cultural researcher can reach that stage in 3 to 5 years? There should be a limit even if you want to brag. Don't look at me like that. Lu Wenyan replied calmly, I was merely a failure of a student at the academy back then. I'm not one of their genius students. I've been wasting my life away after graduation, so it's normal for me to be incapable of willpower materialization. If it's really that easy, the number of human experts coming from cultural research academies wouldn't be as low as 30%. Instead, it would be something like 90%. Cultivation is not an easy feat regardless of the path you take. However, I still believe that the path of willpower is the faster and more promising one. If you want to grow strong quickly, this is your only option. The path of willpower. Suyu sank into a long silence before saying, Instructor, are there cultivation methods meant for willpower? Yes. Lu Wenyan suddenly coughed awkwardly. But we don't have any in Nanyuan. You'll get them after entering an academy. Of course, the premise of getting a willpower cultivation method was to first accomplish willpower materialization. He left that unmentioned. Otherwise, Suyu would probably start cursing at him. In fact, The process of studying the languages of the myriad races and their cultivation methods is an act of training your willpower. The effect is even more pronounced when studying the original texts. Lu Wenyan's expression turned stern again. You need to know that the reading materials we have here are not the original texts. The original texts would actually contain the power or willpower of the corresponding race within. After studying and deciphering these reading materials, one would benefit greatly. Of course, working with these materials can also be dangerous. For example, one might lose their mind. Every single year, there would be some Academy members losing their mind while studying these original texts. Remember to be careful when you start working on them in the future. The more powerful a cultivation method or the more important a document, the more powerful the willpower contained within would be. Because of that, it is rather easy to discern how important a document can be. The more powerful the willpower within, the more important the document would be. You can try visiting the Sia Trade Company. The ordinary-looking cultivation methods are guaranteed to be trash. In fact, the things they sell there are all leftovers, useless things that are completely harmless to the general public. Su Yu smiled helplessly. He knew it. Something good would not be left on the shelf for long. Lu Wenyan smiled and said, "Tell me. Do you still intend to join a war academy? In a cultural research academy, you can still train your body. But in a war academy, you might not have the opportunity to train your willpower anymore. After all, the powerful original texts will only be available in the cultural research academies. As long as you have the required strength, such as reaching the Skyzor realm, you'll be able to enter the all-heaven battlefield at any time. Going there at the infinite strength realm is the same as going as cannon fodder. What's the point? Or do you simply lack the confidence to grow strong as a willpower cultivator? In that case, it wouldn't matter which academy you join. You won't be able to grow strong." Su Yu had never been certain of his decision to join a war academy. But now, he was even more uncertain. Should he still try joining a war academy? There did not seem to be a need to do so anymore. So it turned out that he could grow strong in a cultural research academy as well? Cultural Research Academy, Original Texts, Willpower Cultivation. Su Yu was deep in thought as he walked out of the office with the bottle of blood essence in hand. He still intended to try using the blood essence. It would naturally be even better if he could cultivate both his willpower and physical body at the same time. The source swallowing technique might be the key to accelerating his physical cultivation. Cultural Research Academy. Su Yu came to a decision. Perhaps he should really join a cultural research academy. That had been his original goal anyway. After Su Yu left, the principal entered the office while shaking his head. "Old man, you're scamming a student again." "What do you mean?" Lu Wenyan was displeased. "Willpower materialization, you've been cultivating for 50 years. Have you materialized your willpower? That will happen soon." Lu Wenyan declared confidently, "I'll reach the Skyzor realm the moment I materialize my willpower. At that time, a puny fresh infinite strength cultivator like you will be nothing for me." Yu the principal was speechless. Fine, he would let the instructor have this. As for Su Yu, it was indeed better for him to join a cultural research academy. After all, cultivation in a war academy was far too dangerous. This instructor had been using the same story to sway the mind of numerous students over the years. Each time a student started doubting their decision to join a cultural research academy, he would give them the same speech, sending them all to the various cultural research academies. The Great Sia Cultural Research Academy should really confer you an award. Without you, they would have missed out on a decent number of students every year. Lu Wenyan did not seem to mind. "I don't have an award, but they have been sending me a bonus of $200,000 each year. That's enough for me." The principal was left speechless. He couldn't resist scolding, "You must be a spy from Great Sia Cultural Research Academy. Why are you saying it like that? I've never denied that. I've always been listed as a staff member of the Great Sia Cultural Research Academy. How can you call me a spy?" Lu Wenyan laughed happily. The principal had nothing to say. Lu Wenyan was right. Most of these language instructors were sent directly from the cultural research academies. Even the rare instructors that weren't from the academies would find themselves quickly recruited. That was all for the sake of making sure that the talented students wouldn't all join the war academies. After all, research was much less exciting than physical cultivation, and youngsters were all rather hot-blooded. It was important that they kept a closer eye on these youngsters. Suyu returned home with the glass bottle containing 3 drops of blood essence. The blood essence of a great strength realm being might be worthless for experts, but it was extremely valuable for Suyu. After all, each drop was worth $50,000. If it wasn't for his lack of money, he wouldn't have been willing to spend his merit points for this. Even without the teacher's reminder, Suyu still knew how important merit points were. That was something you might not be able to buy even with money. Of course, he certainly would entertain the thought of selling his points if someone offered him more than $50,000 per point. Thinking about it, I seem to be even richer than Dad. He was only able to save over $300,000 after so many years. Suyu laughed in amusement. The $300,000 in his father's bank account might not even be as valuable as his 18 merit points. However, his father was also someone with merit points. Some had been spent for cultivation. As for the remaining points, Suyu knew what the points were used for even though his father had not talked about them. His father had probably given those points out during his retirement. In fact, that was something a lot of retired veterans would do. Suyu knew that many of the retired veterans in the neighborhood had done so. After all, their comrades that were still fighting on the battlefield would need those points more than them. Helping each other, trusting each other. That was how the soldiers of humanity had always been. If not for the age restriction, there would probably be even more retired veterans returning to the army this time. A lot of the veterans were already approaching 50 during their retirement, so these people would not have the chance to return to the army for a second time. Clearing his mind of all the random thoughts, Suyu willed for the book to appear in his mind. As usual, the pages started flipping before stopping at the iron-winged bird's page. Blood essence activation, what should I activate? An ability or the cultivation method? After a short thought, Suyu decided. Source swallowing technique. It was very likely that the abilities would provide him with an instant burst of strength. Without an actual opponent before him, it would be a waste to activate them. Of course, he wouldn't mind trying the abilities if he had enough blood essence. After all, it could be very dangerous to use the abilities without knowing their strength. How many drops per activation? Is 1 drop enough? As Suyu willed in his mind to have the cultivation method activated, he swallowed a drop of blood essence. This time, he suffered no pain whatsoever. The blood essence was instantly absorbed by the book the moment it entered his mouth. The book in his mind trembled. Next, the words on the golden page changed. Foundation source technique, source swallowing, activated for a duration of 1 hour. 1 hour? Suyu cursed. He could feel all his pores opening up to rapidly absorb the ambient source chi around him. It felt as though all 9 of his acupoints had been temporarily opened. That was the work of this book. Someone at the source opening realm wasn't supposed to be able to do so. Without opening the 9 acupoints, one wouldn't be able to sense source chi. By extension, one wouldn't be able to actively absorb source chi either. With the book, Suyu had gained the ability to sense source chi. He could absorb the source chi all around him with a thought. The ambient source chi of Nanyuan was rather thin in density, but that was only relative to what an infinite strength cultivator needed. For great strength and source opening cultivators, what Nanyuan had was more than enough. Crack. This was the first time his body had ever actively absorbed source chi. Like a ravenous beast, his flesh started madly taking in the chi to temper and refine itself. A faint glow covered all 9 of his acupoints, while a large amount of source chi gathered around his head to temper his acupoints.